Hey, I need you to stop inviting your mom over every weekend, I told my husband, Jack, directly. He let out a deep sigh. Sophie, you always say no to everything. What do you mean? You don't want me to build a house, you don't want my mom to visit, you say no to everything. That's not what I meant. Then what do you mean? How long do we have to wait? My name is Sophie, my husband, Jack, and I have been married for 5 years. Our main goal is to buy our own home. Now that we've saved enough money, we're ready to move out of our rental. I've always dreamed of having my own home. Once we settle in, we want to start a family and raise our kids there. Our hopes were growing, but a problem was brewing. Jack's mom, who had heard about our plans, started getting involved in a way that didn't feel right. I heard you're finally buying a house. Yes, that's true. Have you picked out what kind of house you want? Yeah, we have an idea. Well, that's great. Let me know if I can help. Thanks, but no need. Oh, by the way, have you checked out the showroom near your place? No, we haven't had time yet. Well, I'll set up an appointment for you. We can go together. No, I'd prefer if you didn't. I'd like to look at the new house with Jack, just the two of us. But after that, Jack's mom kept trying to get involved. She even showed up at our place unexpectedly. I got you a brochure for some land that's for sale. Thanks. She handed me several brochures. What do you think of this one? It's near the station and big enough for 2 families. What did she say? Did she just say 2 families? I didn't know what to say. Jack's mom kept talking. If it's not close to the train station, it's not convenient, and you'll want to be near a hospital when you get older. This place is close to a supermarket too. You're probably having a hard time deciding, right? At first, she asked if she could help, but soon she was taking over, pushing her own ideas as if she would be living there too. This wasn't right. That night, I told Jack everything that had happened. Wait, I think she might have mentioned living with us. What? You want to live together? Well, if you're okay with it. I won't force you, don't worry. I felt completely caught off guard by his response. If I'm okay with it? I don't think so. I couldn't believe Jack was still unsure about this. I knew I'd be the one left to deal with my mother-in-law if I had to tell her we're not going to live together. Why couldn't Jack see that? Should we stop building the house? What? Why? Because of the way you said it. If I say no to living with her, she'll know I said no. We'll be living together for a long time, and I don't want things to be awkward. I don't want a house if that's what it's going to cost. We can raise our kids in a rental, and we can use the money we saved for the down payment on their education instead. My husband, Jack, suddenly started to panic. Wait, I understand now. I'll say no to her, and we'll build the house. No, it's fine. You can't even talk to your mom. I've never seen Jack stand up to his mother before. Don't worry, trust me. Why are you so desperate? I want to live in my own house and raise our kids there. You didn't seem that excited when we first talked about it. No, I was excited. That's a mean thing to say. I feel the same way about our kids. I see. Jack told me he would turn down his mom, but I didn't believe it. I didn't think he could do it, considering how he always acts with her. But the day after our conversation, my mother-in-law stopped bothering us and even called to apologize. Sophie, I got scolded by Jack. He told me he wanted to live with you alone. I'm sorry I pushed my opinions on you. Jack actually talked to her. He could speak up when it really mattered, but for some reason, I still felt a little unsure. I told Jack about his mom's apology, and he had a big smile on his face. See, when I say I'll speak up, I do. Why do you have that look in your eyes? I was wondering if you really said it. Are you doubting me? Isn't that a little odd? I've never seen you speak up to your mom in 5 years, and you didn't even do it in front of me. That's mean. I really tried. You're right. I'm sorry. By the way, you're sweating like crazy. What's going on? Oh, it's just hot. It is a bit warm today, isn't it? It's the middle of winter. Anyway, let's move forward with the house contract. Do you really want to build a house that badly? Of course I do. That's why we've been saving all this time. By now, I wasn't that interested in building the house anymore. The home I'd dreamed of for so long now felt less exciting. I'd worked hard to save the money, but because of my mother-in-law's actions and Jack's attitude, it felt like my dream had been taken away, and I stepped back. Still, Jack kept talking about building the house. 6 months passed since our argument. Jack still brought up the house, but I wasn't convinced. My mother-in-law, who had been quiet, was starting to lose her patience. She began showing up at our house more often. She never talked about the house anymore, but her attitude was getting more and more overbearing. Jack and I both work, and we both have weekends off, yet, every weekend, my mother-in-law comes over. If it was just once a month, I could handle it, but every weekend? It's too much. Jack seems really happy about it. I want to rest on the weekends, at least on Saturdays and Sundays, but my mother-in-law comes over at 7 a.m. and watches TV at a really loud volume. If I don't get up, she walks around outside my room. My husband, Jack, was so busy taking care of his mom that I thought that was probably enough for him. One weekend, I couldn't take it anymore and got up at 7:30 a.m. to start my day. My mother-in-law immediately said, "How can you still be asleep with a guest in the house?" And then she would stay late on Sunday night. Jack never said anything about her behavior, and when I looked at him, the word divorce popped into my mind, but I didn't want a divorce if I could avoid it. I wanted to figure out a way to fix things. "Hey, I need you to stop having your mom over every weekend," I told Jack, being honest about how I felt. He sighed loudly. "Sophie, you always say no to everything." "What do you mean? You don't want to build a house, you don't want my mom to visit, you always say no." "I didn't mean it like that." "Then what do you mean? How long do we have to wait for? You just said we dot." "What do you mean? Who else is waiting?" "What? Didn't you just say we?" Jack's face turned red, and he started sweating. "I didn't say that. Maybe I misunderstood, but we can't build a house if your mom keeps coming over every weekend." "Why not?" "Because I need some rest." "If my parents came over every weekend, would you get any rest?" "Your parents won't come, they have their own nice home." "I'm tired of this nonsense." "That's not the point. It's not about the house. I'll ask my parents to come stay next week." Jack raised his voice. "Absolutely not." "Why not?" "Because it's too much. Don't tell your parents to come over. My mom is the only one allowed here. This is my house too. I'm the head of the house. If you don't like it, then leave." "Are you serious? You're not useful to me anymore. I'm done with you. You can't make my mom happy, and she won't live with us if you can't even build the house." "You promised she wouldn't live with us." "What are you talking about? Once the house is built, we can do whatever we want, including living with my mom." "What do you mean? I told you all this, and you still don't get it." "I was planning to have my mom live with us after the house was built." "I knew it. How could my mother-in-law back down so easily?" Jack was just scheming with her the whole time. "I see, that's what this was all about." "Fine, I'll leave. I hope you won't regret it." "I won't. Don't even try to show your face in front of me again." I packed up the few things I needed and went to my parents' house. They were surprised by my sudden return, but when I explained everything, they welcomed me with open arms. That's what family is for, right? I guess our relationship ended because I couldn't trust Jack from the start. "Dad, I'm sorry. I know things didn't work out between you two, but work and personal life are separate things." "Yes, I agree. And your mother and I are divorced. No alimony, no money issues, just the division of property." 3 months passed since then, and now my ex-husband was kneeling in front of me. "I'm sorry, Sophie's dad. I'm not your father anymore. Be careful what you call me." Boss? This is a surprise, isn't it? Because I divorced your daughter?" "What are you talking about?" Why had Jack come all the way to my parents' house and gotten down on his knees? It turned out he was transferred to a new position he didn't want. My ex-husband and I both worked for my father's company. He seemed to think that his transfer was because of our divorce, but it had nothing to do with it. My father had said during the divorce that personal matters didn't affect work. Every employee at his company gets transferred to a new region every few years as part of a skill-building program, not as a punishment. But that explanation didn't make sense to my ex-husband. "Lisa. Stop, it's the boss. I thought you told me never to show my face again." "I apologize, please. This isn't about obligation. I was supposed to be the next president, wasn't I?" "I can't believe you interrupted me with nonsense like that." I think you're mistaken. I'm still the next president, whether you divorce me or not." "What? Of course, I'm his daughter." My ex-husband just nodded and left. The next day, he quit his job. People told him it wasn't a demotion, but he refused to listen. A few days later, I saw him in a place I never expected. I was watching a documentary on TV when I saw my ex-husband. He was standing in line for a meal donation at a volunteer organization. dressed poorly. Life has a strange way of changing things. I couldn't help but think of the word regret that I had said to him. I'm sure he regretted how he acted. The fact that he was holding 2 meals suggested that one was for his mother. I don't know all the details, but it's clear that his life now is very different from the one he had before. As for me, I'm happy being on my own. I'm busy with work during the week, but on my days off, I enjoy my free time. It's such a blessing to get a good night's sleep. I don't have to deal with early mornings anymore. I'm living in peace and happiness. The coldness my ex-husband showed, which I couldn't explain to anyone, used to hurt, but now, I see it as something that strengthens me when I stand up to my in-laws. Lisa, you did the right thing. I hope you can really enjoy your time on your own now.
The diamond on my finger caught the light, sending sparkles dancing across the pristine white tablecloth. I couldn't help but smile, twisting the ring back and forth, still not quite believing it was there. After 10 years, Michael had finally proposed. "Emily, dear, you're positively glowing." Eleanor, my soon-to-be mother-in-law, reached across the table and patted my hand. "I'm so thrilled," Michael finally popped the question. "Lord knows I've been dropping hints for years." I laughed, feeling a warmth spread through my chest. "Trust me, Eleanor, I've been dropping hints too. But you know Michael, always moving at his own pace." Eleanor's smile faltered for just a moment, so quickly I almost missed it. She took a sip of her tea, her perfectly manicured nails clinking against the delicate china. "Yes, well, that's my Michael. Always been a bit stubborn." Something in her tone made me pause. "Is everything all right, Eleanor?" She waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, of course, dear. It's just..." She leaned in, lowering her voice. "There's something you should know about our family. Something I probably should have told you years ago." My heart started to race. "What is it?" Eleanor glanced around the crowded restaurant as if checking for eavesdroppers. "It's about Michael's father. The story he's told you, well, it's not entirely true." I frowned, confused. "What do you mean?" "Michael said his father died when he was young." "That's what Michael believes," Eleanor said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But the truth is, his father left us, abandoned us when Michael was just a baby." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. "What? But... Why would Michael lie about that?" Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "He doesn't know, Emily. I told him his father died. I couldn't bear for him to know the truth." My mind was reeling. How could Michael not know something so fundamental about his own life? And why had Eleanor kept this secret for so long? Before I could ask any more questions, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Michael. "Where are you? Thought we were meeting at 2?" I glanced at my watch and cursed under my breath. "I'm so sorry, Eleanor. I completely lost track of time. I'm supposed to be meeting Michael to look at venues." Eleanor nodded, composing herself quickly. "Of course, dear. Go. We can talk more later." As I gathered my things, Eleanor grabbed my wrist. "Emily, please, don't say anything to Michael. Not yet. Let me be the one to tell him." I hesitated, torn between my loyalty to Michael and the pleading look in Eleanor's eyes. Finally, I nodded. "All right. But soon, okay? He deserves to know." Eleanor smiled gratefully. "Thank you, dear. You're going to make a wonderful addition to our family." As I hurried out of the restaurant, my mind was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. Joy at my engagement warred with the shock of Eleanor's revelation. How well did I really know the man I was about to marry? I spotted Michael waiting outside the first venue on our list, looking handsome as ever in his tailored suit. He grinned when he saw me, pulling me in for a kiss. "There's my beautiful fiancé," he said. "Ready to start planning our future?" I forced a smile, pushing down the guilt and confusion roiling in my stomach. "Of course, let's go." As we walked into the venue, hand in hand, I couldn't shake the feeling that our perfect love story was about to get a lot more complicated. I stared at my phone, my heart sinking as I read Michael's text. "Sorry, babe. Can't make it to the florist today. Work emergency." This was the 3rd time in 2 weeks he'd canceled our wedding preparations. I sighed, tossing the phone onto the couch. The excitement of planning our big day was quickly turning into frustration and doubt. The doorbell rang, startling me out of my thoughts. I opened the door to find Eleanor standing there, a sympathetic smile on her face. Emily, dear, I hope I'm not intruding, but I thought you might need some company today. I felt a rush of gratitude. Eleanor, you're a lifesaver. Please, come in. As we settled in the living room with cups of tea, Eleanor asked, "So how are the wedding plans coming along?" I couldn't hold back anymore. The words tumbled out in a rush. Honestly, they're not. Michael keeps canceling on me. It's like he doesn't even care about the wedding. Eleanor's face softened with concern. Oh, sweetheart, I'm sure that's not true. Michael can be difficult sometimes, but he loves you. I nodded, not entirely convinced. I know. It's just, ever since you told me about his father, I can't help but wonder what else I don't know about him. Eleanor reached out and squeezed my hand. Emily, I'm so sorry. I never meant to cause trouble between you two. Perhaps I shouldn't have said anything. No, I said firmly. I'm glad you told me. I just wish Michael would open up to me more. We spent the next hour talking, Eleanor sharing stories about Michael's childhood that made me laugh and reminded me why I fell in love with him. By the time she left, I felt a little better, but the nagging doubt remained. That evening Michael came home late, looking tired and distracted. Hey, I said, trying to keep the accusation out of my voice. How was your work emergency? He barely glanced at me as he loosened his tie. Oh, yeah, just a client freaking out about nothing. You know how it is. I took a deep breath. Michael, we need to talk about the wedding. You keep canceling our appointments, and I'm starting to feel like I'm planning this whole thing alone. He finally looked at me, his expression a mix of guilt and irritation. Come on, Em. You know how busy I am at work. Can't you handle this stuff? His dismissive tone sparked something in me. This is our wedding, Michael. Not just mine. It should be important to both of us. Michael's face hardened. Of course it's important to me. I just don't see why we need to make such a big deal out of every little detail. We argued back and forth, our voices rising until we were both shouting. Finally, Michael grabbed his keys. I need some air, he snapped, slamming the door behind him. I collapsed onto the couch, tears streaming down my face. How had we gone from the joy of our engagement to this in just a few short weeks? My phone buzzed with a text from Eleanor. Checking in, hope everything's okay. Without thinking, I called her back. Eleanor? I choked out between sobs. Can you come over? I really need someone to talk to. Of course, dear, she said without hesitation. I'll be right there. As I hung up, I felt a mix of relief and guilt. I should be talking to Michael, working things out with him. Instead, I was turning to his mother for comfort. But as I waited for Eleanor to arrive, I couldn't shake the feeling that she understood me better than Michael did right now, and that thought terrified me more than anything else. The clock on the nightstand glared at me, 2:37 a.m. I rolled over, the empty space beside me, a cold reminder of Michael's absence. This was the third night this week he'd stayed out late, claiming it was just innocent fun with the guys. Bachelor's last hurrah, he'd said with a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. I grabbed my phone, thumb hovering over Michael's name. No, I decided. I wouldn't be that person, constantly checking up on him. Instead, I opened my messages with Eleanor. You awake? I typed, then immediately regretted it. What kind of soon-to-be daughter-in-law texts her fiancé's mother in the middle of the night? To my surprise, a reply came almost instantly. Can't sleep either? Want to talk? Relief washed over me. Michael's out again. I'm worried. Come over for breakfast tomorrow. We'll chat. The next morning, I found myself sitting at Eleanor's kitchen table, a steaming mug of coffee warming my hands. I don't know what to do, I confessed. It's like Michael's a different person lately. Eleanor's face was a mask of concern. Has he said anything about his father? I shook my head. No, and I haven't brought it up. I'm scared it'll just make things worse. She reached across the table, squeezing my hand. Emily, dear, I'm so sorry. I never meant for my secret to cause such trouble. It's not your fault, I assured her, but I can't help feeling like there's something Michael's not telling me. Just then, my phone buzzed. A text from Michael. Where are you? Woke up and you were gone. I showed Eleanor the message, my frustration bubbling over. He's one to talk. He didn't even come home last night. Eleanor's expression hardened. This isn't like Michael. Something's not right. As I typed a reply, another text came through. This one made my blood run cold. Who's Vanessa? Why does she keep calling you? I stared at the screen, confusion and anger warring inside me. Eleanor, I don't know any Vanessa. What is he talking about? Eleanor's face paled. Oh dear, I think I might know who Vanessa is. My heart raced. What? Who? She hesitated, then said softly, Vanessa is Michael's father's new wife. The room spun. What? But you said his father left when Michael was a baby. How could he? I'm so sorry, Emily. There's more to the story than I told you. Michael's father, he's been trying to reconnect. I've been keeping his messages from Michael, trying to protect him. I felt like I couldn't breathe. So all this time, Michael's father has been alive? Trying to contact him, and you've been hiding it. Eleanor nodded, tears in her eyes. I thought I was doing the right thing, but now, with Michael acting so strangely, I'm afraid he might have found out somehow. My mind raced. Could this explain Michael's recent behavior? The late nights, the secretiveness? Was he meeting with his long-lost father behind my back? I have to go, I said, standing abruptly. I need to talk to Michael. Eleanor grabbed my arm. Emily, wait, please be careful. Michael, he can be like his father sometimes. Unpredictable when he's upset. Her words sent a chill down my spine. What exactly was she implying? As I drove home, my emotions swirled like a storm. Anger at Michael for lying, at Eleanor for keeping secrets, at myself for not seeing what was happening right in front of me. I pulled into our driveway, steeling myself for the confrontation to come. But as I opened the front door, I froze. The house was in chaos. Drawers pulled out, contents strewn across the floor. And there, in the middle of it all, stood Michael, a suitcase at his feet and a wild look in his eyes. Michael, I whispered, fear gripping my heart. What's going on? He turned to me, his face a mask of pain and fury. I know everything, Emily. About my father, about the lies, and I know you've been talking to my mother behind my back. As he advanced towards me, I realized with terrifying clarity that I didn't know this man at all. And I had no idea what he was capable of. The morning of my wedding day dawned bright and clear, a stark contrast to the turmoil in my heart. I stood before the mirror, my white dress a ghostly reflection of the bride I was supposed to be. But all I could see were the shadows of doubt in my eyes. Last night's confrontation with Michael played on repeat in my mind. His anger, his accusations, the way he'd grabbed my arm when I tried to leave. In the end, he'd broken down, sobbing about his father's betrayal and begging for forgiveness. We'd talked for hours and he'd promised to be better, to be honest from now on. But as I adjusted my veil, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was making a terrible mistake. A soft knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. Emily? Eleanor's voice called. Can I come in? I hesitated, then called out, Yes, come in. Eleanor entered, her eyes widening as she took in my appearance. Oh, Emily, you look beautiful. I tried to smile, but it felt forced. Thank you, Eleanor. She approached me, her face etched with concern. Are you sure about this, dear? After everything that's happened? I turned back to the mirror, avoiding her gaze. Michael explained everything. He was just upset about his father. We're going to work through it together. Eleanor's reflection frowned. Emily, I know my son. He's not always... Please, I interrupted, my voice sharper than I intended. I've made my decision. Eleanor nodded, her eyes sad. All right, dear, I just want you to be happy. As she left, I felt a pang of guilt. Eleanor had become such a source of comfort these past weeks, but she was still Michael's mother. I couldn't keep relying on her. The ceremony was a blur. I walked down the aisle, my eyes locked on Michael. He looked handsome in his tux, his smile bright and reassuring. But as I reached him, I noticed a slight tremor in his hands. We exchanged vows, Michael's voice steady as he promised love and fidelity. When it was my turn, I hesitated for just a moment, my doubts threatening to choke me. But I pushed through, the words leaving my lips even as my heart raced with uncertainty. I now pronounce you husband and wife, the officiant declared, and Michael pulled me in for a kiss. The small crowd of family and friends applauded, but it sounded distant and muffled to my ears. At the reception, I plastered on a smile, accepting congratulations and posing for photos. But my eyes kept drifting to Michael, watching as he downed glass after glass of champagne. Are you okay? I whispered during a quiet moment. He grinned, his eyes slightly unfocused. Never better, babe. We did it. As the night wore on, Michael became more boisterous, his laughter too loud, his movements unsteady. I saw Eleanor watching him with a mix of concern and resignation. Finally, as the last guests were leaving, Michael stumbled, nearly knocking over the gift table. I rushed to steady him, the smell of alcohol heavy on his breath. "I think it's time we went home," I said softly. He laughed, pulling me close. "Home? But the party's just getting started." I extricated myself from his grip, my patience wearing thin. "Michael, please, you're drunk." His face darkened. "Don't tell me what I am," he snapped, loud enough for the remaining guests to turn and stare. Embarrassment and anger flooded through me. This was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. Instead, I felt like I was drowning. Eleanor appeared at my side, her hand on my arm. "Let me help you get him home," she offered quietly. I nodded, too tired to argue. As we maneuvered a protesting Michael into the car, Eleanor squeezed my hand. "Remember, Emily," she said, her voice low and urgent, "you always have a choice." As we drove away, Michael already passed out in the back seat. Her words echoed in my mind. A choice. But what choice did I have now? I was married, for better or for worse. Looking at Michael's slumped form in the rearview mirror, I couldn't help but wonder, was this the worse I'd signed up for? And if so, how much worse could it get? I zipped up the last suitcase, my heart fluttering with a mix of excitement and apprehension. Our honeymoon to Bali was just hours away, a chance to escape the tension of the past few weeks and start our married life on a positive note. Maybe, just maybe, this trip would be the fresh start Michael and I desperately needed. As I wheeled the luggage to the front door, my phone rang. Michael's name flashed on the screen. "Hey, honey," I answered, trying to keep my voice light. "Are you on your way home? Our flight's in 4 hours." There was a pause, then Michael's voice came through, strained and hesitant. I have some bad news." My stomach dropped. "What is it?" "It's my mom," he said. "She's in the hospital, some kind of sudden illness. I'm with her now." I sank onto the couch, my mind reeling. "Oh my God, is she okay? What happened?" "The doctors aren't sure yet," Michael replied. "But I don't think we can go on our honeymoon, not with Mom like this." The words hit me like a physical blow. I closed my eyes, fighting back tears of frustration and disbelief. "Michael, are you sure? Can't your sister stay with her? We've been planning this trip for months." I know, he said, his voice rising. "But she's my mother, Emily. I can't just leave her like this." I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm of emotions inside me. "Okay, I understand. Should I come to the hospital?" "No," Michael said quickly, then softened his tone. "No, that's okay. You stay home. I'll call you with updates." As I hung up, a nagging doubt crept into my mind. Something about Michael's tone, the way he'd refused my offer to come to the hospital, it didn't sit right. Before I could talk myself out of it, I dialed Eleanor's number. It rang several times before going to voicemail. I frowned, my unease growing. I paced the living room, my mind racing. What if Eleanor wasn't really sick? What if this was just another of Michael's lies? But why would he lie about this? Hours passed, and still no word from Michael. My calls went straight to voicemail. By evening, I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my keys and drove to the hospital. At the reception, I asked for Eleanor's room number, only to be met with confusion. "I'm sorry, ma'am," the nurse said, "but we don't have any patient by that name." My world tilted on its axis. That's impossible. My husband said she was admitted this morning." The nurse shook her head sympathetically. "I've been on shift all day. No, Eleanor has been admitted." I stumbled out of the hospital, my mind in chaos. Michael had lied. Again. But why? Where was he really? As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a text. It was from an unknown number, but the content made my blood run cold. "Your husband isn't who you think he is. Meet me at the Bluebird Cafe in an hour if you want the truth. V. Vanessa, Michael's father's new wife, the woman at the center of all this chaos." I stood in the hospital parking lot, the weight of decision heavy on my shoulders. Should I meet this mysterious Vanessa? Should I confront Michael? Or should I finally listen to that voice inside me that had been screaming for weeks, telling me to run? My fingers hovered over my phone, ready to reply to the text. In that moment, I knew my decision would change everything. There was no going back from here. With a deep breath, I typed my response, sealing my fate with 4 simple words. "I'll be there. Emily." As I got into my car, heading towards the unknown, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just a ruined honeymoon. This was the beginning of the end of everything I thought I knew about my life, my marriage, and the man I thought I loved. My hands trembled as I pushed open the door to the Bluebird Cafe. The aroma of coffee and pastries did nothing to calm my frayed nerves. I scanned the room, my heart pounding, until I spotted a woman in the corner booth. She looked up, her eyes meeting mine, and I knew instantly this was Vanessa. As I slid into the seat across from her, she spoke first. "Emily, I presume? Thank you for coming." I nodded, studying her face. She was beautiful, with an air of confidence that made me feel instantly inadequate. "You said you had the truth about Michael. I'm listening." Vanessa sighed, pushing a manila folder across the table. "Everything you need to know is in here, but I warn you, it's not pretty." With shaking hands, I opened the folder. Photos spilled out. Michael with another woman, laughing, kissing. Dates stamped in the corner showed this wasn't just a one-time thing. It had been going on for months. "Who is she?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. "His secretary," Vanessa replied. "But that's not all. Keep reading." I flipped through documents, bank statements, emails, even a copy of a lease agreement. The pieces started to fall into place, each revelation more devastating than the last. "He's been embezzling from his company," I said, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. "And he's planning to leave the country?" Vanessa nodded grimly. "With her? The honeymoon cancellation? It was just an excuse. He's planning to disappear with the money and his mistress." I felt like I was drowning, gasping for air in a sea of betrayal. "But why? Why tell me all this?" "Because," Vanessa leaned forward, her eyes intense, "Michael isn't just hurting you. He's hurting everyone around him, including his father, my husband. We want to stop him before it's too late." Just then, my phone rang. Eleanor's name flashed on the screen. I answered, my voice shaky. "Eleanor?" "Emily, dear. I've been trying to reach you. Is everything all right? Michael said you two had to cancel your honeymoon because of me, but I'm perfectly fine." The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. I ended the call, my mind racing. "She's not sick. She never was." Vanessa's expression was a mix of sympathy and determination. "Now you know the truth. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" I stood up abruptly, a plan forming in my mind. "I'm going to confront him. And then I'm going on that honeymoon, but not with Michael." Vanessa raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" A grim smile played on my lips. "I'm taking Eleanor instead. Let's see how Michael likes it when his lies catch up to him." I rushed home, my mind a whirlwind of emotions and plans. As I burst through the door, I found Michael packing a suitcase. "Em," he exclaimed, surprise and guilt flashing across his face. "I thought you'd be out. I was just—" "Packing for our canceled honeymoon?" I interrupted, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "Or maybe for your little getaway with your secretary." The color drained from Michael's face. "What are you talking about?" I threw the folder on the bed, photos and documents scattering. "I know everything, Michael. The affair, the embezzlement, all of it." He lunged for the folder, but I was quicker. I snatched it back, backing away. "Don't even think about it. It's over, Michael. I'm leaving and I'm taking everything we have. You'll have nothing left when I'm done." Michael's expression morphed from shock to anger. He advanced towards me, his fists clenched. "You can't do this to me. I won't let you." Fear coursed through me, but I stood my ground. "Try and stop me. I dare you." As Michael raised his hand, the front door burst open. Eleanor rushed in, her face a mask of fury. "Michael Andrew Thompson, don't you dare touch her!" Michael froze, his eyes darting between Eleanor and me. I took advantage of his confusion, grabbing my pre-packed suitcase. "Come on, Eleanor," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "We have a plane to catch." As we walked out, leaving a stunned Michael behind, I felt a strange mix of pain, relief, and exhilaration. The life I thought I knew was over, but a new chapter was just beginning. And for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. The moment I stepped through our front door, the tension in the air was palpable. Michael sat on the couch, his face a mask of barely contained anger. Our impromptu honeymoon with Eleanor had given me time to gather my thoughts, but nothing could have prepared me for this confrontation. "Welcome home," Michael said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Did you enjoy your little vacation with my mother?" I dropped my suitcase, steeling myself for the battle ahead. "Cut the act, Michael. We both know what's really going on here." He stood, his eyes flashing dangerously. "Oh, and what exactly is that, Emily?" "Your affair, for starters," I spat, my voice trembling with rage. And let's not forget the embezzlement. Did you really think you could just run away with your secretary and all that stolen money? Michael's face paled, then flushed with anger. Who told you? Was it Vanessa? That meddling bitch? It doesn't matter who told me, I shot back. What matters is that it's true, isn't it, Michael? He lunged forward, grabbing my arm. You don't understand. I had no choice. I wrenched away from him, my heart pounding. No choice? You had every choice. You chose to lie, to cheat, to steal. I did it for us, he yelled, his composure crumbling. For our future, I laughed bitterly. Our future. There is no our anymore, Michael. You destroyed that the moment you decided to betray me. Suddenly the door burst open. Eleanor rushed in, followed by a man I'd never seen before. Michael's face drained of all color. Dad? He whispered, his voice small and uncertain. The man, Michael's father, stepped forward, his face a mix of sadness and determination. It's time to face the music, son. Michael's eyes darted between us all, like a cornered animal. You don't understand, any of you. I was going to make it right. I just needed more time. More time for what? I demanded. More lies? More betrayal? Eleanor moved to my side, her hand on my shoulder. Emily, dear, I'm so sorry. I never imagined Michael would go this far. As the reality of the situation crashed down around us, Michael's facade finally crumbled. He sank to his knees, tears streaming down his face. I'm sorry, he sobbed. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for it to go this far. But his words rang hollow in my ears. The man I thought I knew, the man I had loved for 10 years and married just weeks ago, was a stranger to me now. It's over, Michael, I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. I want a divorce. He looked up at me, his eyes pleading. Emily, please. We can work this out. I'll make it right, I swear. I shook my head, feeling a strange sense of calm wash over me. No, Michael. You've had your chances. I'm done. As if on cue, there was a knock at the door. 2 police officers entered, their faces grim. Michael Thompson? One of them said. We have a warrant for your arrest on charges of embezzlement and fraud. As they read him his rights and led him away in handcuffs, I felt a complex mix of emotions. Relief, sadness, anger, and an overwhelming sense of loss. The life I thought I had, the future I had planned, it was all gone in an instant. Eleanor wrapped her arm around me as we watched Michael being driven away. What will you do now, dear? She asked softly. I took a deep breath, feeling both terrified and strangely liberated. I don't know, I admitted. But for the first time in a long time, I feel like I can finally start living for myself. As the police car disappeared around the corner, I realized that this wasn't just the end of my marriage. It was the beginning of a new chapter in my life, one filled with uncertainty, but also with the promise of freedom and self-discovery. The courthouse loomed before me, a monument to the end of my marriage and the beginning of my new life. I took a deep breath, steadying myself for what lay ahead. Eleanor's reassuring hand on my shoulder gave me the strength to push open the heavy doors. As we entered the courtroom, I saw Michael for the first time since his arrest. He looked haggard, his once confident demeanor replaced by a shell of a man. Our eyes met briefly, and I felt a twinge of something. Not love, not anymore, but a complex mixture of pity, anger, and regret. The proceedings began, a blur of legal jargon and formalities. I barely registered the words until the judge addressed me directly. Mrs. Thompson, do you wish to make a statement before the court renders its decision? I stood, my legs shaky but my resolve firm. Yes, Your Honor. As I faced the courtroom, I saw not just Michael, but the faces of those whose lives he'd affected, his parents, our friends, even his former secretary, who looked as broken as I felt. 10 years ago, I fell in love with a man I thought I knew, I began, my voice growing stronger with each word. I built my life around him, dreamed of a future with him, but that man never truly existed. Instead, I married a stranger, a liar, a cheater, a thief. Michael flinched at my words, but I pressed on. I stand here today not just as a victim of his crimes, but as a survivor. I've lost my marriage, my trust, and the future I thought I'd have. But I've gained something too, the truth and the strength to face it. I turned to Michael, meeting his gaze head on. I forgive you, Michael. Not for your sake, but for mine. I refuse to let your betrayal define me or my future. As I sat down, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The judge's verdict came swiftly. Michael was sentenced to prison for his financial crimes, and our divorce was granted. Outside the courthouse, Eleanor enveloped me in a tight hug. "I'm so proud of you, Emily," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. I pulled back, studying her face. "Eleanor, I don't know how to thank you for everything." She smiled, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Oh, my dear, you don't need to thank me. Your family, no matter what." Those words, so simple yet so profound, broke something open inside me. I began to sob, releasing all the pain, anger, and fear I'd been holding on to for so long. Eleanor held me, her presence a balm to my battered soul. As my tears subsided, I realized something fundamental had shifted within me. The betrayal still hurt, the wounds were still raw, but I was no longer defined by them. I was more than Michael's ex-wife, more than a victim of his deceit. I was Emily, strong, resilient, and ready to write my own story. "What now?" Eleanor asked gently as we walked away from the courthouse. I took a deep breath, feeling the warm sun on my face and the promise of possibility in the air. Now I start over. I find out who I am without Michael, without the lies and the doubt. Eleanor squeezed my hand. "And you won't be alone. I'll be right here every step of the way." I smiled, feeling a genuine spark of hope for the first time in months. I know. And that means more to me than you could ever know. As we drove away, leaving behind the shattered remains of my old life, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges I couldn't yet imagine. But I was ready to face them, armed with the truth, supported by unexpected friendships, and fueled by a newfound belief in myself. The betrayal that had nearly broken me had also set me free. And in that freedom, I found the strength to embrace the unknown, to forgive without forgetting, and to love again, starting with myself. As Eleanor and I planned a celebratory dinner, I realized that sometimes the most beautiful relationships can bloom from the ashes of betrayal. My story wasn't over, it was just beginning. And this time I would be the author of my own happily ever after. The shrill ring of my phone pierced through the fog of my grief. I glanced at the caller ID and felt my stomach clench. Linda. My mother-in-law's timing was as impeccable as ever. "Claire, darling, I need you here by 6. The caterers are hopeless, and Jack's cousins are arriving early." Linda's voice crackled through the speaker, sharp and demanding. I closed my eyes, fighting back tears. "Linda, I can't. My mother's funeral is tomorrow, and Oh, that's right," she cut me off, her tone dismissive. "Well, surely you can spare a few hours. Family obligations don't stop for these things, you know." My jaw dropped. "These things? Linda, my mother just died. And I'm terribly sorry for your loss, dear, but life goes on, doesn't it? We can't all wallow in misery. Now, I expect you here at 6 sharp. Wear something presentable, not those awful jeans you insist on parading around in." The line went dead before I could respond. I stared at the phone, a mixture of disbelief and anger coursing through me. How dare she? How could anyone be so callous? I was still fuming when Jack walked in, his brow furrowing at the sight of my face. "Claire, what's wrong?" "Your mother," I spat, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. "She wants me at the house by 6 to help with some family gathering. Apparently, my mother's death isn't a good enough excuse to skip out on family obligations." Jack's face darkened. "She what? No, absolutely not. I'll call her right now and—" "Don't bother," I sighed, suddenly feeling exhausted. "You know how she is. It'll only make things worse." He sat beside me on the couch, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. "I'm so sorry, Claire. I'll talk to her, I promise. You don't have to go." I leaned into him, grateful for his warmth. "I know, it's just... Why does she have to be like this? Especially now?" "Because she's Linda," Jack said, a hint of bitterness in his voice. "She's never known how to be anything else." We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of everything pressing down on us. I thought about my mother, about the empty space she'd left behind. And then unbidden, Linda's voice echoed in my head again. "Family obligations don't stop for these things." "Maybe I should go," I said quietly. Jack pulled back, looking at me in surprise. "What, Claire? No, you don't owe her anything, especially not now." "I know, but—" I trailed off, struggling to put my feelings into words. If I don't go, she'll never let me hear the end of it. And right now, I can't deal with that on top of everything else. Jack's face softened with understanding. "Okay, if that's what you want to do, I'll support you. But I'm coming with you and we're not staying long." I nodded, feeling a small spark of gratitude amidst the grief. At least I wouldn't have to face Linda alone. As we got ready to leave, I caught sight of myself in the mirror. My eyes were red-rimmed, my face pale and drawn. I looked exactly like what I was, a woman who had just lost her mother. Linda's words echoed in my mind again. Wear something presentable. With a sudden burst of defiance, I grabbed my favorite pair of worn jeans from the closet. If Linda wanted me there so badly, she'd have to take me as I was, grief, jeans and all. As we drove to Linda's house, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. Little did I know just how right I was. As we pulled up to Linda's sprawling mansion, I felt Jack's hand squeeze mine. "We can still turn back," he said, his voice soft but firm. I shook my head, steeling myself. "No, let's just get this over with." The moment we stepped inside, Linda descended upon us like a perfectly coiffed vulture. Her eyes narrowed at my jeans, but before she could comment, Jack intervened. "Mom, we can't stay long. Claire's mother's funeral is tomorrow, remember?" Linda waved a dismissive hand. Yes, of course, but surely you can spare a few hours for family, Claire?" The way she said family made my skin crawl. I bit back a retort, reminding myself why we were here. Keep the peace. Don't make waves. As Linda whisked Jack away to greet some relatives, I found myself alone in the bustling living room. Memories flooded back, our first Christmas here as newlyweds. Tense arguments with his mother, the constant pressure to conform to Linda's idea of the perfect family. "Claire, dear," Linda's voice cut through my thoughts. "Be a darling and help with the hors d'oeuvres, won't you?" I gritted my teeth and headed to the kitchen, where I found Jack's father, Robert, looking lost among platters of fancy finger foods. "Claire," he said, relief evident in his voice. "Thank goodness. I haven't the faintest idea what I'm supposed to do with all this." I couldn't help but smile. Robert had always been kind to me, a calm presence in the storm of Linda's expectations. "Don't worry. I've got this. Why don't you go rescue Jack from Linda's clutches?" He chuckled, patting my shoulder as he left. "You're a saint, Claire. Don't let Linda push you around too much. Okay?" If only it were that easy. As I arranged the platters, my mind wandered back to my college days with Jack. We'd been so carefree then, dreaming of a future together. Jack had been determined to forge his own path, away from his mother's influence. But somehow, over the years, Linda had wormed her way back in, her tendrils of control tightening around our lives. "Claire!" Linda's sharp voice jolted me back to reality. "What on earth are you doing? Those canapés go on the silver tray, not the gold one." I closed my eyes, counting to 10. "Sorry, Linda. I'll fix it right away." "See that you do," she sniffed. "Really, Claire, it's not that difficult. Sometimes I wonder what Jack sees in you." The words stung more than I cared to admit. As I rearranged the canapés, I caught sight of Jack across the room, deep in conversation with his cousin. He looked up, our eyes meeting, and I saw a flicker of concern cross his face. Just then, Linda's voice rang out again. "Everyone, gather round! Jack has some exciting news to share." My heart dropped. "News? What news?" Jack made his way to the center of the room, looking uncomfortable. "Mom, I don't think now is the time." "Nonsense," Linda beamed. "Go on, tell everyone about your promotion." "Promotion?" This was the first I'd heard of it. I watched, a knot forming in my stomach, as Jack reluctantly addressed the room. "Well, I've been offered a position as head of software development," he said, his eyes darting to me apologetically. "It's a great opportunity, but nothing," Linda interrupted. "It's wonderful news. Of course, you'll have to move to New York, but I'm sure Claire won't mind, will you, dear?" All eyes turned to me. I stood there, frozen, platters of canapés forgotten in my hands. Move to New York? Leave behind everything, my job, my friends, my mother's memory. Just as I was grappling with her loss, the room spun around me. I saw Jack's panicked face, heard Linda's triumphant voice, felt the weight of expectations crushing down on me. And then, for the first time in years, I did something I'd never dared to do before. I said no. The room fell silent, all eyes fixed on me. I could feel the weight of their stares, but it was Linda's gaze that burned the hottest. "What did you say?" she hissed, her perfectly painted smile faltering. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "I said no, Linda. We're not moving to New York." Jack was at my side in an instant, his hand on my arm. "Claire, You didn't even tell me about this," I said, turning to him. "Were you planning on making this decision without me?" Linda's laugh cut through the tension like a knife. Oh, Claire, don't be silly. Of course Jack was going to tell you. He just wanted to surprise you with the good news. I felt my resolve hardening. Good news? My mother just died, Linda. I'm burying her tomorrow, and you want me to uproot my entire life? A collective gasp rippled through the room. Linda's face flushed red, her eyes narrowing. Now, Claire, there's no need to make a scene. We can discuss this later in private. No, I said, my voice stronger now. We'll discuss it now. I'm tired of pretending everything's fine when it's not. I'm tired of your constant criticism and your impossible expectations. Jack squeezed my arm. Claire, maybe we should. Let her speak, son, Robert's voice cut in. He stepped forward, placing a hand on my shoulder. Go on, Claire. Say what needs to be said. Linda's eyes flashed dangerously. Robert, don't encourage this nonsense. But I was beyond stopping now. Years of pent-up frustration came pouring out. You've never respected me, Linda. Never accepted me as part of this family. You've criticized everything, from my clothes to my job to the way I fold napkins. And now, when I'm grieving my mother, you expect me to just fall in line with your plans? The room was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Linda's face had gone from red to white, her lips pressed into a thin line. How dare you? She sputtered. After everything I've done for you, for this family. What you've done, I interrupted, is try to control every aspect of our lives. You've pushed and manipulated and bullied until Jack and I barely recognize our own relationship anymore. I turned to Jack, tears stinging my eyes. And you've let her do it. You promised me when we got married that we'd make our own path. But look at us now. We're right back under her thumb. Jack looked stricken. Claire, I never meant... I didn't realize. Linda's voice cut through, sharp as a razor. That's quite enough. I will not stand here and be insulted in my own home. Claire, if you can't behave civilly, perhaps it's best you leave. I laughed, a hollow sound even to my own ears. You're right about one thing, Linda. I should leave, but not just this party. I'm leaving this toxic situation for good. I turned to Jack, my heart breaking. I love you, but I can't do this anymore. I won't be second to your mother's wishes. When you're ready to stand up to her, to choose our life together over her plans for you, you know where to find me. With that, I walked out, leaving a stunned silence in my wake. As I reached the front door, I heard footsteps behind me. Claire, wait! It was Robert. He pressed something into my hand, a small, worn book. Your mother gave me this years ago. I think you should have it now. I looked down at the book, recognizing my mother's handwriting. Before I could respond, Robert squeezed my shoulder. You're stronger than you know, Claire. Don't let anyone dim your light. As I walked away from the house, clutching my mother's book, I felt a mix of terror and exhilaration. I had no idea what came next, but for the first time in years, I felt like I was finally standing up for myself. I clutched my mother's book to my chest as I stumbled into my childhood home. The silence was deafening, a stark reminder of the life that had been extinguished. I collapsed onto the worn sofa, my body racked with sobs I'd been holding back for days. As my tears subsided, I opened the book Robert had given me. A folded piece of paper fluttered out, my mother's elegant handwriting immediately recognizable. With trembling hands, I unfolded it. My dearest Claire, it began. If you're reading this, I'm no longer with you. There's so much I need to tell you, things I should have said long ago. I devoured her words, learning of a life I'd never known she'd lived. My mother, Elizabeth Johnson, wasn't just the quiet librarian I'd grown up with. She was Elizabeth J. Blackwood, the reclusive author of a beloved series of novels. She'd written under a pseudonym to protect our privacy, to give me a normal life. The revelation left me reeling. My mother, the woman I thought I knew so well, had been living a double life all this time. And now, with her gone, I was left to grapple with this new reality alone. My phone buzzed incessantly, Jack's name flashing on the screen. I ignored it, too overwhelmed to deal with him or Linda or any of it right now. Instead, I dove back into my mother's letter, drinking in every word, every secret she'd kept hidden. As dawn broke, I was startled by a knock at the door. Exhausted and emotionally drained, I opened it to find Jack standing there, his face a mask of concern and regret. Claire, he said softly, I've been worried sick. Can we talk? I hesitated, then stepped aside to let him in. He took in my tear-stained face, the scattered papers around me, and the book clutched in my hand. What's all this? he asked. I took a deep breath. It's my mother's life, the one I never knew about. I handed him the letter, watching as his eyes widened in surprise. Elizabeth J. Blackwood? Your mother was, but how? Why didn't you ever say anything? Because I didn't know, I said, my voice cracking. She kept it from everyone, even me. And now she's gone, and I have all these questions I'll never get to ask her. Jack reached for me, but I stepped back. Claire, I'm so sorry. About everything. I should have told you about the job offer. I should have stood up to my mother. I've been a coward, and I've let you down. I nodded, too tired to argue. Yes, you have, but right now I can't think about that. My mother's funeral is in a few hours, and I need to focus on saying goodbye. Jack's face fell. Of course. I understand, but please let me be there for you. Let me support you through this. Before I could respond, my phone rang. It was Linda. I stared at the screen, feeling a familiar mix of dread and obligation. Don't answer it, Jack said firmly. You don't owe her anything, especially not today. I looked at him, surprised by the steel in his voice. Jack? I mean it, Claire. I'm done letting my mother control our lives. Today is about you and your mom. Nothing else matters. As if on cue, the phone stopped ringing, only to start again almost immediately. Linda's persistence knew no bounds. I stood there, torn between the ingrained need to please and the desire to honor my mother's memory. Jack's words echoed in my mind, mingling with the revelations from my mother's letter. I thought about the strong, independent woman who had raised me, who had lived a secret life as a celebrated author. What would she want me to do? With a deep breath, I made my decision. I picked up the phone, my finger hovering over the answer button. This moment, I realized, would define not just this day, but the course of my life going forward. Whatever choice I made, there would be no going back. I looked at Jack, then down at my mother's book, and finally at Linda's name flashing on my phone screen. It was time to take control of my own story. The church was filled with a somber silence, broken only by muffled sobs and the gentle rustling of clothing. I stood at the podium, my mother's book clutched tightly in my hands, trying to find the words to say goodbye. My mother was. I began, my voice cracking. I cleared my throat and started again. My mother was more than just a librarian. She was Elizabeth J. Blackwood, the author who touched so many lives with her words. A collective gasp rippled through the congregation. I saw confusion, surprise, and dawning recognition on many faces. I pressed on, drawing strength from the truth I was finally able to share. She kept this part of herself hidden to protect our family, to give me a normal life. But in doing so, she denied herself the recognition she deserved. Today, I want to honor not just the mother I knew, but the incredible woman she truly was. As I continued my eulogy, I felt a sense of peace washing over me. I was giving my mother the tribute she deserved, acknowledging both the woman who raised me and the artist who had touched so many lives. Just as I was finishing, I saw movement at the back of the church. Linda was there, her face a mask of determination. She caught my eye and gestured urgently for me to come outside. I felt a familiar knot of anxiety form in my stomach. I stepped down from the podium, squeezing Jack's hand as I passed him. I'll be right back, I whispered. Outside, Linda was pacing impatiently. Claire, darling, I know this is a difficult time, but we really must discuss the family gathering. Everyone's expecting you and... I held up a hand, cutting her off. Linda, I'm in the middle of my mother's funeral. Whatever it is, it can wait. Her eyes narrowed. Now, Claire, I've been very patient with all this unpleasantness. But family obligations don't just disappear because you're feeling emotional. You need to pull yourself together and think about what's best for everyone. I stared at her, incredulous. What's best for everyone? My mother just died, Linda. I'm grieving. The only thing I need to think about right now is honoring her memory. Linda's face hardened. I see. Well, if that's how you feel, perhaps it's best if you don't come to the gathering at all. We wouldn't want your mood to bring everyone down. Something inside me snapped. Years of pent-up frustration and resentment came pouring out. You know what, Linda? You're right. I won't be coming to your gathering. Not today. Not ever again. I'm done letting you dictate my life and make me feel small. She gasped, taking a step back. How dare you speak to me like that? After everything I've done for you and Jack. Everything you've done? I laughed bitterly. You've done nothing but try to control us, to mold us into what you think we should be. Well, I'm not playing that game anymore." Just then Jack appeared at the church door. "Claire, is everything okay?" His eyes widened as he took in the scene before him. Linda turned to him, her voice syrupy sweet. "Jack, darling, please talk some sense into your wife. She's being terribly unreasonable." I held my breath, watching Jack's face. This was it, the moment of truth. Would he stand with me, or cave to his mother's demands as he had so many times before? Jack looked between us, his jaw set. Then, to my surprise and relief, he moved to stand beside me. "Mom, I think you should leave. Now." Linda's mouth fell open in shock. "Jack! You can't possibly." "I can, and I am," he said firmly. "Claire is my wife, and this is her mother's funeral. Your behavior is completely unacceptable. If you can't respect that, then you need to go." As Linda sputtered and protested, Jack gently guided me back towards the church. "Come on, Claire. Let's go say goodbye to your mom." With one last look at Linda's stunned face, I turned and walked back into the church, feeling lighter than I had in years. As we took our seats, Jack squeezed my hand. "I'm so sorry it took me this long to stand up to her," he whispered. "But I promise you, things are going to be different from now on." I nodded, tears in my eyes. As the service resumed, I felt a mix of grief and hope. My mother was gone, but perhaps, in losing her, I had finally found the strength to reclaim my life. I stood at the entrance of Linda's lavish home, my black mourning dress a stark contrast to the cheerful decorations and the sound of laughter spilling out from inside. Jack squeezed my hand, his face a mix of concern and determination. "We don't have to do this," he said softly. "We can turn around right now." I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "No, we need to face this. It's time to put an end to all of it." As we stepped inside, the chatter died down, replaced by a wave of hushed whispers. I could feel everyone's eyes on me, taking in my tear-stained face and somber attire. Linda appeared suddenly, her smile brittle and forced. "Claire, Jack, you made it," she trilled, as if we were arriving fashionably late to a cocktail party, rather than coming straight from a funeral. "Everyone, look who's here!" The room fell into an uncomfortable silence. I could see the confusion and shock on people's faces, their gazes darting between my grief-stricken appearance and Linda's forced cheer. Linda, oblivious or willfully ignoring the tension, continued, "Claire, darling, why don't you go freshen up? You look absolutely dreadful. There's a lovely dress in the guest room that would be much more appropriate for the occasion." I felt Jack stiffen beside me, but before he could speak, I found my voice. "No, Linda, I won't be changing. I've just come from burying my mother, and I won't pretend otherwise for your comfort or anyone else's." A collective gasp rippled through the room. Linda's smile faltered for a moment before she recovered. "Now, Claire, there's no need to be dramatic. We all understand you're upset, but life goes on. Your mother wouldn't want you to wallow, would she?" Something inside me snapped. All the years of biting my tongue, of trying to please this woman who had never shown me an ounce of genuine kindness, came rushing to the surface. "You have no idea what my mother would have wanted," I said, my voice low but clear. "You never bothered to know her, or me for that matter. All you've ever cared about is appearances and control." Linda's face flushed red. "How dare you speak to me like that in my own home, after everything I've done for you?" "Everything you've done?" I laughed bitterly. "You've done nothing but criticize and belittle me from the day I married Jack. You've tried to control every aspect of our lives, to mold us into your perfect vision of what a family should be. Well, I'm done. I won't let you dictate my life or my grief any longer." The room was dead silent now, all eyes riveted on the unfolding drama. I could see Jack's father, Robert, watching with a mix of surprise and what looked like pride. Linda, her composure completely shattered, turned to Jack. "Are you going to let her speak to me like this? After all I've sacrificed for you?" Jack stepped forward, placing a protective arm around me. "Mom, that's enough. Claire is right. Your behavior has been unacceptable, not just today, but for years. It stops now." Linda's eyes widened in disbelief. She looked around the room, seemingly searching for an ally, but found only uncomfortable and averted gazes. "Well," she said, her voice trembling with rage, "if that's how you both feel, perhaps it's best if you leave. I won't have my own son and his wife disrespecting me in front of our friends and family." I felt a moment of triumph, quickly followed by a wave of exhaustion. This confrontation on top of the emotional toll of the funeral was more than I could bear. I turned to Jack, ready to leave, when a voice cut through the tension. "Elizabeth Johnson's daughter? Is that really you, Claire?" I froze, recognizing the name my mother had written under. Slowly, I turned to face an elderly woman I vaguely recognized as one of Linda's friends. Yes, that was my mother's pen name. How did you? The woman's eyes lit up with recognition and excitement. "Oh, my dear, I've been a fan of your mother's books for years. I had no idea she was Linda's daughter-in-law. This is extraordinary." As murmurs of surprise and interest rippled through the crowd, I saw Linda's face drain of color. The revelation hung in the air, a game-changing moment that threatened to upend everything. I stood there, caught between grief, anger, and a strange sense of vindication, knowing that the next few moments would change the course of my life forever. The room erupted into a cacophony of voices, everyone talking at once. I stood there, frozen, as the elderly woman approached me, her eyes shining with admiration. "My dear, your mother's books were simply magnificent." The silent whisper changed my life. To think, all this time, she was right here in our midst. I felt a surge of pride mixed with an overwhelming sadness. "Thank you," I managed to say. She never told anyone. I only found out after she passed." The woman's face fell. "Oh, you poor thing, and to think, Linda made you come here today of all days." All eyes turned to Linda, who stood rigid, her face a mask of fury and embarrassment. I had no idea," she stammered. "Claire never said anything about her mother being a writer." "Because I didn't know," I shot back, finding my voice again. "And even if I had, would it have mattered to you? Would you have treated me any differently?" The room fell silent, the tension palpable. Jack stepped forward, his face a mix of anger and determination. "Mom, how could you do this? How could you drag Claire here on the day of her mother's funeral?" Linda's eyes darted around the room, searching for an ally and finding none. Even her closest friends were looking at her with shock and disappointment. I was just trying to maintain our family traditions," she said weakly. "Claire knows how important these gatherings are." Robert, who had been silent until now, stepped forward. "Linda, that's enough. What you've done is inexcusable." Linda turned to him, her eyes flashing. "Don't you dare turn against me too, Robert. I've dedicated my life to this family, to maintaining our status and connections. You can't possibly—" "Status?" I interrupted, my voice trembling with anger. "Is that all you care about, your precious status? Well, let me tell you something, Linda. My mother, the woman you looked down on for years, has touched more lives with her words than you ever will with your shallow parties and social climbing." The elderly woman nodded vigorously. "It's true. Elizabeth Johnson's books are beloved by millions. She was a true artist, a voice for the voiceless." I felt tears welling up in my eyes, but I pressed on. "And you made me leave her funeral for this. You couldn't even give me one day to grieve in peace." The horror of the situation seemed to dawn on the guests. Murmurs of disapproval rippled through the crowd. Linda's carefully crafted image was crumbling before her eyes. "I think you owe Claire an apology, Linda," Robert said firmly. Linda's face contorted with rage. "Apologize? For what? For trying to keep this family together? For maintaining our social obligations?" "For being cruel," Jack said quietly. "For putting your own desires above everyone else's needs. For never once considering how your actions might affect others." Linda's eyes darted between Jack, Robert, and me. I could see the realization dawning on her face that she had finally pushed too far. "Fine," she spat. "If that's how you all feel, then perhaps it's best if you leave, all of you. I won't stand here and be insulted in my own home." A hush fell over the room. This was it, the moment everything changed. I looked at Jack, seeing the conflict in his eyes. This was his mother, after all. Despite everything, I knew this decision wouldn't be easy for him. "Jack," I said softly, "we don't have to." He shook his head, squeezing my hand. "No, Claire, we do. Mom," he turned to Linda, his voice firm, "we're leaving, and until you can recognize the harm you've caused and make genuine amends, we won't be coming back." As we turned to leave, I heard Linda's voice, small and broken for the first time. "Jack, please, don't go." I held my breath, waiting for Jack's response. This was the moment that would define our future. Would he stand firm, or would Linda's influence prove too strong once again? Jack paused, his hand on the doorknob. The entire room seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Jack's hand tightened on the doorknob, his knuckles white with tension. He turned back to face Linda, his eyes filled with a mix of sadness and resolve. "Mom," he said, his voice steady, "I love you, but I can't keep living like this. We can't keep living like this. Until you're ready to truly change, to see how your actions have hurt us, we need to go our own way." With that, he opened the door, and we stepped out into the cool evening air. The silence behind us was deafening. As we drove home, the weight of everything that had happened crashed over me. I broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. Jack pulled over to the side of the road and held me close. "I'm so sorry, Claire," he whispered. "I should have stood up to her years ago. I let this go on for far too long." I looked up at him through tear-blurred eyes. "What happens now?" He took a deep breath. "Now we start over, together." The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Robert called to inform us that he was filing for divorce from Linda. Her actions at the party had been the final straw in a marriage long strained by her controlling behavior. "I should have done this years ago," he told us. "Maybe then things wouldn't have gotten so out of hand." Linda, for her part, alternated between rage and desperate pleas for forgiveness. She left countless voicemails, each one swinging wildly between threats and tearful apologies. We didn't respond to any of them. Instead, Jack and I focused on healing. We spent long evenings talking, really talking, for the first time in years. I shared stories about my mother, reading passages from her books and marveling at the depth of her talent. Jack listened, offering comfort and support, free from the shadow of his mother's influence. One evening, as we sat on our porch watching the sunset, Jack turned to me with a serious expression. "Claire, I've been thinking, what if we moved, started fresh somewhere new?" I blinked in surprise. "Move? But your job, our friends." He shook his head. "None of that matters if we're not happy. And let's be honest, there are too many painful memories here. I think we both need a clean slate." As I considered his words, I felt a spark of excitement ignite within me. A fresh start, away from Linda's toxic influence and the weight of our past struggles. It was terrifying, but also exhilarating. "Where would we go?" I asked, a smile tugging at my lips. Jack grinned. "Anywhere we want. The world's our oyster." Over the next few months, we planned our move. We decided on a vibrant city on the opposite coast, far from Linda's reach. Jack found a new job at a startup, and I began exploring the possibility of publishing my mother's unpublished works. The day before we left, we received one last call from Linda. Jack put it on speakerphone, his hand gripping mine tightly. "Jack, Claire," her voice was small, lacking its usual commanding tone. I wanted to say goodbye, and I'm sorry for everything. I see now how much damage I've caused. I hope someday you can forgive me." We exchanged a look, years of hurt and resentment warring with the possibility of reconciliation. "It's a start, Mom," Jack said finally. "We need time, but maybe someday." As we hung up, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. It wasn't a perfect ending, but it was a beginning. The next morning, as we loaded the last of our boxes into the moving truck, I paused to look back at our old house. So many memories, both good and bad, were contained within those walls. "Ready?" Jack asked, taking my hand. I nodded, feeling a surge of hope and excitement. "Ready." As we drove away, heading towards our new life, I thought about my mother, about the courage it must have taken her to live a double life, to pursue her passion in secret. I felt her strength flowing through me, giving me the courage to embrace this new chapter. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I knew Jack and I would face them together, free from the shadows of our past. As the familiar landscape faded behind us, I smiled, ready to write the next chapter of our story. The sound of shattering glass jolted me from my reverie. I rushed to the kitchen, my heart pounding, to find Emily standing amidst a sea of broken shards, her eyes brimming with tears. "I'm sorry, Mom," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I was trying to reach the good glasses for graduation, and I dropped them." I exhaled, relief washing over me. "It's okay, sweetheart. Are you hurt?" She shook her head, and I carefully navigated the minefield of glass to reach her. As I wrapped my arms around her, I couldn't help but notice how tall she'd grown. My stepdaughter was no longer the little girl I'd first met all those years ago. "Where's Dad?" Emily asked, her voice muffled against my shoulder. I stiffened involuntarily. "Working late again, I suppose?" Emily pulled away, her eyes searching mine. He's been working late a lot lately, hasn't he? Before I could respond, the front door slammed, and Daniel's voice boomed through the house. Evelyn? Emily? Where are you two? I felt Emily tense beside me. In the kitchen, I called out, forcing a cheeriness I didn't feel into my voice. Daniel appeared in the doorway, his tie loosened and his shirt rumpled. His eyes widened as he took in the scene before him. What happened here? Just a little accident, I said, moving to grab the broom. Nothing to worry about. Nothing to worry about? Daniel's voice rose. Those were my grandmother's crystal glasses, Evelyn. How could you be so careless? I froze, broom in hand. I wasn't. It was my fault, Dad, Emily interjected. I was trying to get them down for graduation, and... Graduation? Daniel's brow furrowed. That's not for another week, is it? The silence that followed was deafening. I watched as realization dawned on Emily's face, quickly followed by hurt and disappointment. It's this Saturday, Dad, she said quietly. I reminded you last week, remember? Daniel ran a hand through his hair, looking flustered. Of course, of course. I've just been so busy with work lately, it must have slipped my mind. I felt a familiar anger bubbling up inside me. Maybe if you were home more often, these things wouldn't slip your mind, I snapped. Daniel's eyes narrowed. What's that supposed to mean? It means exactly what it sounds like, I retorted, my patience wearing thin. You're never here, Daniel. You're missing everything important in Emily's life. I'm providing for this family, Daniel shouted, his face reddening. Someone has to pay the bills around here. Stop it, Emily cried out, tears streaming down her face. Just stop fighting. The sight of her distress doused my anger like a bucket of cold water. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. Emily, sweetie, why don't you go to your room? I'll clean this up. She hesitated for a moment, looking between us before nodding and fleeing the kitchen. As soon as she was gone, Daniel rounded on me. What the hell was that about, Evelyn? Undermining me in front of my own daughter? I met his gaze steadily. Your daughter needs you present, Daniel, not just your money. He scoffed. You don't know what you're talking about. I'm doing everything I can for this family. As he stormed out of the kitchen, I couldn't help but wonder if that was true. The nagging doubts I'd been pushing aside for months came rushing back. Where was he really going all those late nights? Why did he always smell faintly of perfume I didn't wear? I gripped the broom tightly, my knuckles turning white. Something had to change, and soon. For Emily's sake, and for my own. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Daniel's late nights had become more frequent, and his excuses increasingly flimsy. It wasn't until Emily approached me one afternoon, her face etched with worry, that my suspicions truly took root. Mom, she said, her voice barely above a whisper, I think Dad's cheating on you. The words hit me like a physical blow. What makes you say that, sweetie? Emily's eyes darted around nervously before she pulled out her phone. I saw a text on his phone last night when he left it on the counter. It was from someone named Stacy. Look. My hands trembled as I took the phone. The message was brief, but damning. Can't wait to see you tonight, handsome? Same place? I felt the blood drain from my face. Oh, Emily, I breathed, pulling her into a hug. I'm so sorry you had to see this. She clung to me tightly. What are we going to do? The question hung in the air, heavy with implications. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. We're going to find out the truth. That night, after Daniel left for another late meeting, I did something I never thought I'd do. I followed him. The guilt gnawed at me as I trailed his car through the city, but it was quickly overshadowed by a growing sense of dread. He pulled up to a small Italian restaurant on the outskirts of town. Through the window, I watched as he greeted a young, blonde woman with a kiss that was far from platonic. My world shattered. I don't remember driving home. The next thing I knew, I was sitting in our driveway, tears streaming down my face. Emily found me there, still clutching the steering wheel. Mom? Her voice broke through my haze. Did you find out? I nodded, unable to speak. Emily climbed into the passenger seat and wrapped her arms around me. We sat there in silence, our shared pain a tangible thing between us. Finally, I found my voice. We can't stay here, Emily, not with him. She pulled back, her eyes wide. What do you mean? I mean we need to leave, start over somewhere new. The words tumbled out, gaining strength as I spoke. You're graduating soon. We could move, find a new place, just the two of us. Emily's face was a mix of emotions, fear, excitement, uncertainty. But what about Dad? What about everything here? I took her hand in mine. Your father made his choice. Now it's time for us to make ours. We deserve better than this, Emily. Both of us do. She nodded slowly, a spark of determination lighting in her eyes. Okay, let's do it. The next few days were a whirlwind of secret planning and barely contained emotions. I reached out to an old college friend who owned a real estate company in a city a few hours away. She offered me a job on the spot, sensing the urgency in my voice. All the while, we maintained a facade of normalcy around Daniel. It was excruciating, watching him lie so effortlessly about his whereabouts, knowing what I knew. The breaking point came 3 days before Emily's graduation. Daniel stumbled in late, reeking of alcohol and perfume. I was waiting for him in the living room. Have a good meeting, I asked, my voice dripping with sarcasm. He froze, his eyes darting around the room. What are you talking about? I stood, my anger finally boiling over. I know about Stacy, Daniel. I know everything. The color drained from his face. Evelyn, I can explain. Save it, I snapped. I don't want to hear your excuses. I want you out of this house, now. He stumbled towards me, reaching out. Please, let's talk about this. We can work it out. I stepped back, my resolve hardening. There's nothing to work out. We're done, Daniel. Emily and I are leaving after her graduation. Don't try to stop us. As I watched him crumble before me, I felt a strange mix of sadness and relief. The life we had built was over, but a new one was just beginning. Emily and I would face it together, stronger for having weathered this storm. I turned and walked away, leaving Daniel standing alone in the wreckage of our marriage. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in years, I felt hope. The morning after my confrontation with Daniel, I woke to find the house eerily quiet. A note on the kitchen counter told me he'd gone to stay with a friend for a few days. I crumpled it up, a mix of relief and anxiety churning in my stomach. Emily padded into the kitchen, her eyes red-rimmed from a sleepless night. Is he gone? I nodded, pulling her into a hug. For now. But we need to move fast, sweetie. Are you sure you're okay with this? She pulled back, her jaw set with determination. I'm sure, Mom. We deserve better. I squeezed her hand, marveling at her strength. All right, then. Let's get to work. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. I reached out to my old college friend, Sarah, who owned a real estate company in a city 3 hours away. When I explained our situation, she didn't hesitate. Evelyn, I have the perfect position for you, Sarah said, her voice crackling over the phone. We need a new head of marketing, and with your experience, you'd be perfect. When can you start? I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. After Emily's graduation next week. Is that too soon? Not at all. I'll email you the details. And Evelyn, you're doing the right thing. With the job secured, I turned my attention to finding us a place to live. Emily and I huddled over my laptop, scrolling through apartment listings. What about this one? Emily pointed to a cozy 2-bedroom near her new school. I clicked on it, scanning the details. It's perfect, Em. Let's schedule a virtual tour. As we made plans, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of guilt. Daniel had been a part of our lives for so long. Was I doing the right thing, uprooting everything? My doubts were shattered that evening when Daniel came home unexpectedly. The smell of alcohol hit me before I even saw him. Evelyn, he slurred, stumbling into the living room. We need to talk. I stood, putting myself between him and Emily. You're drunk, Daniel. This isn't the time. He lurched forward, grabbing my arm. No, you can't leave me. I won't let you. Emily jumped up, her face pale. Dad, stop it. You're hurting her. His grip tightened, and I winced. Daniel, let go, now. For a moment, I saw a flicker of the man I'd once loved in his eyes. Then it was gone, replaced by anger and fear. He released me, stumbling back. You'll regret this, he muttered, before storming out of the house. As the door slammed behind him, Emily burst into tears. I pulled her close, my own heart racing. It's okay, sweetie. We're okay, I murmured, stroking her hair. She looked up at me, her eyes wide with fear. What if he tries to stop us? I took a deep breath, steeling myself. He won't. I won't let him. That night, after Emily had finally fallen asleep, I sat at the kitchen table, my mind racing. I knew we had to leave sooner than planned. Daniel's outburst had made that clear. I pulled out my phone, dialing Sarah's number. She answered on the second ring. Evelyn, is everything okay? I took a shaky breath. Sarah, I hate to ask this, but is there any way we could move up my start date? Things have escalated here. There was a pause, and I held my breath. Finally, Sarah spoke. Of course, I'll make it work. Do you need help getting out? Tears of relief stung my eyes. Thank you, and no, I think we can manage. We just need to leave as soon as possible. As I hung up, I heard a noise behind me. Emily stood in the doorway, her face a mix of fear and determination. I heard everything, she said quietly. When do we leave? I stood crossing the room to embrace her. Tomorrow. We'll leave right after your graduation ceremony. She nodded against my shoulder. Good, I'm ready. As we stood there, holding each other in the quiet kitchen, I felt a surge of love and pride for my brave, resilient daughter. Whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together. But first, we had to make it through one last day in this house. One last confrontation with Daniel. The thought sent a chill down my spine, but I pushed it aside. We were so close to freedom. Nothing could stop us now. The morning of Emily's graduation dawned bright and clear, a stark contrast to the turmoil churning inside me. As I helped Emily into her gown, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to go terribly wrong. You look beautiful, sweetheart, I said, smoothing down her collar. Emily's smile was tinged with sadness. I wish we didn't have to leave like this, Mom. I cupped her face in my hands. I know, but sometimes we have to make hard choices to protect ourselves. Are you having second thoughts? She shook her head firmly. No, I'm ready. As we drove to the school, I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see Daniel's car following us. But the streets were mercifully empty. The graduation ceremony was a blur of speeches and applause. I spotted Daniel in the crowd, his eyes red-rimmed and his suit rumpled. My heart clenched, but I pushed the feeling aside. We were so close to freedom. As Emily walked across the stage to receive her diploma, I felt a surge of pride and determination. We were doing the right thing. After the ceremony, we made our way through the crowd of well-wishers. I kept Emily close, my eyes scanning for Daniel. Suddenly he appeared in front of us, blocking our path. Congratulations, Emily, he said, his voice strained. I'm so proud of you. Emily tensed beside me. Thanks, Dad. Daniel's eyes locked onto mine. Evelyn, can we talk? Please? I hesitated, torn between the urge to flee and the need to end this cleanly. 5 minutes, Daniel. That's all. We stepped away from the crowd, Emily hovering nervously nearby. Daniel's facade crumbled as soon as we were alone. Please don't do this, Evelyn. I know I messed up, but we can fix this. I'll do anything. I steeled myself against the pain in his eyes. It's too late for that, Daniel. You made your choices. Now I'm making mine. He grabbed my arm, his grip tight. You can't take my daughter away from me. I wrenched free, anger flaring. She's not just your daughter. I've been more of a parent to her than you ever were. Daniel's face contorted with rage. You'll regret this. I'll fight you every step of the way. You'll never get away with. His tirade was cut short by Emily's voice, sharp and clear. Stop it, Dad. Just stop. We both turned to see her standing there, tears streaming down her face. I'm not a child anymore. I can make my own decisions, and I choose to go with Mom. You did this, not her. Daniel stumbled back as if he'd been struck. Emily, please. But she was already walking away, her head held high. I moved to follow her, but Daniel's hand shot out, grabbing my purse. If you're leaving, you're not taking anything that's mine, he snarled. In that moment, everything seemed to move in slow motion. The purse strap snapped, spilling its contents across the ground. Among the scattered items was a small velvet box, the one containing my grandmother's ring, the last piece of my life before Daniel. As he bent to snatch it up, a fierce protectiveness surged through me. I lunged forward, my hand closing around the box just as his fingers grazed it. This isn't yours, I hissed, clutching the box to my chest. Our eyes met, and for a moment, I saw the man I'd fallen in love with all those years ago. Then his face hardened, and he straightened up. Fine, he spat. Take it. Take everything. But don't think this is over. As he stormed away, I felt a hand on my shoulder. Emily stood beside me, her face a mix of determination and fear. Are you okay, Mom? I nodded, my heart racing. I am now. Let's go home, pack our things, and get out of here. As we walked to the car, I realized that this was it, the point of no return. We were leaving behind everything we knew, stepping into an uncertain future. But looking at Emily's brave face, I knew we could handle whatever came next. We had each other, and that was all that mattered. The day before Emily's graduation, I woke with a start, my heart pounding. Time was running out, and we still had so much to do. I crept downstairs, careful not to wake Daniel, who had finally come home late last night. In the dim light of dawn, I began gathering the last of our important documents: birth certificates, passports, bank statements, anything we'd need for our new life. As I rifled through Daniel's desk, my hands trembling, I stumbled upon something that made my blood run cold. A prenuptial agreement. One I had never seen before, let alone signed. My mind raced as I scanned the document. According to this, if we divorced, I would be entitled to nothing. No alimony, no share of our assets. How could I have missed this? Just then, I heard footsteps on the stairs. Panic surged through me as I quickly shoved the document into my bag and tried to look casual. Daniel appeared in the doorway, his eyes narrowing as he took in the scene. "What are you doing in here so early?" I forced a smile. "Just organizing some papers for Emily's college applications. You know how scattered she can be." He grunted, unconvinced. "Right. Well, don't mess with my stuff." As he shuffled to the kitchen, I let out a shaky breath. That was too close. The rest of the day passed in a blur of last-minute preparations. Emily and I packed our bags in secret, hiding them in the trunk of my car under the guise of donating old clothes. As evening fell, Daniel announced he was going out. "Got a work thing," he muttered, not meeting my eyes. The moment the door closed behind him, Emily turned to me. "Mom, there's something I need to tell you." Her tone sent a chill down my spine. "What is it, sweetie?" She took a deep breath. "I overheard Dad on the phone last night. He knows we're planning to leave. He's going to try to stop us after the graduation ceremony." My mind reeled. How could he know? Had we been too careless? "Did you hear anything else?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Emily shook her head. "Just that he was going to take care of it tomorrow." I sank onto the couch, my head in my hands. Everything we'd planned was falling apart. With the prenup I'd discovered and Daniel's knowledge of our escape, we were more trapped than ever. "What are we going to do?" Emily's voice was small, scared. I looked up at her, my brave, beautiful daughter who had already been through so much. In that moment, I knew I had to be strong for her. "We're going to change the plan," I said, my voice firmer than I felt. "We can't wait until after the ceremony. We need to leave tonight." Emily's eyes widened. "But what about graduation? My diploma?" "I know it's not ideal, sweetheart, but your safety is more important than a piece of paper. We can get your record sent to your new school later." She nodded slowly, understanding the gravity of the situation. "Okay, what do we do?" I stood up, my mind racing. "Pack only what you absolutely need. We'll leave in an hour while your father's still out." As Emily hurried upstairs, I pulled out my phone and dialed Sarah's number. "Sarah, it's Evelyn. I hate to ask this, but is there any way we could come tonight? Things have escalated here." There was a pause. Then Sarah's voice came through, warm and reassuring. "Of course, Evelyn. I'll have everything ready for you. Just be safe, okay?" Tears pricked my eyes. "Thank you. We will." I hung up and took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. This wasn't how I'd imagined our fresh start, sneaking away in the dead of night, but sometimes the path to freedom isn't straight or easy. As I began gathering our things, I heard a car pull into the driveway. My heart stopped. Daniel was home early. In that moment, I knew our window of opportunity was closing fast. It was now or never. We had to leave, and we had to leave now. "Emily," I called up the stairs, my voice urgent. "It's time. We have to go. Now." My heart pounded as I heard Daniel's key in the lock. Emily appeared at the top of the stairs, her eyes wide with panic. "Go out the back," I whispered urgently. "I'll distract him." She nodded, slipping silently down the stairs and towards the kitchen. I took a deep breath and moved to intercept Daniel. He stumbled through the door, reeking of alcohol. His eyes narrowed as he saw me. "What are you doing up?" I forced a smile. "Couldn't sleep. How was your work thing?" He grunted, pushing past me. "Fine. Where's Emily?" "Asleep," I lied smoothly. "Big day tomorrow, remember?" Daniel paused, his gaze sharpening. "Right. Graduation." I held my breath as he looked around suspiciously. Had he noticed the missing photos, the empty spaces where our lives used to be? Suddenly, a crash echoed from the kitchen. Daniel's head snapped up. What was that? Before I could stop him, he was striding towards the sound. I followed, my heart in my throat. We burst into the kitchen to find Emily frozen by the back door, a broken vase at her feet. Her overnight bag was clutched in her hand. Daniel's face contorted with rage. What the hell is going on? Emily's eyes met mine, filled with fear and determination. In that moment, I knew we couldn't run anymore. It was time to face this head on. We're leaving, Daniel, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. It's over. He whirled on me, his fists clenched. Like hell you are. You're not taking my daughter anywhere. Emily stepped forward, her chin raised defiantly. I'm not your property, Dad. I'm going with Mom, and you can't stop us. Daniel's face turned an alarming shade of red. He lunged forward, grabbing Emily's arm. You ungrateful little... I didn't think, I just reacted. My hand connected with Daniel's face with a resounding slap. He staggered back, shock replacing anger. Don't you dare touch her, I hissed. For a moment the kitchen was silent, except for our heavy breathing. Then Daniel straightened, a cold smile spreading across his face. You think you can leave? Good luck with that. He pulled out his phone, waving it tauntingly. One call to my lawyer and you'll be left with nothing. Remember that prenup you signed? My blood ran cold. The prenup I'd found earlier, the one I'd never actually signed. He was bluffing, but Emily didn't know that. I saw the doubt flicker in her eyes. Mom? I took a deep breath. This was it, the moment that would define our future. I could cave to Daniel's threats, stay in this toxic marriage for financial security, or I could take a leap of faith, trusting in the strength Emily and I had built together. You're right, Daniel, I said calmly. I might walk away with nothing material, but I'll have what matters most, my integrity and my daughter. I turned to Emily, holding out my hand. It's your choice, sweetheart. Whatever you decide, I'll support you. The seconds stretched like hours as Emily looked between us. Then, with a resolute nod, she took my hand. Daniel's facade cracked. You can't do this. I'll fight you every step of the way. Save it for the lawyers, I cut him off. We're done here. As we walked out the front door, Daniel's threats fading behind us, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in years, I felt truly free. Emily squeezed my hand as we got into the car. Are you sure about this, Mom? What if he's right about the prenup? I started the engine, a small smile playing on my lips. Let's just say I have a few surprises of my own. Now, how about we go make that graduation ceremony? As we drove away from the house that had been our prison for so long, I knew the hardest part was yet to come. But with Emily by my side, I was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The sun was just peeking over the horizon as we hit the highway, painting the sky in hues of hope. It was a new day in more ways than one, and we were finally, truly, on our way to a better life. The key turned in the lock of our new apartment, and as the door swung open, I felt a rush of emotions, relief, excitement, and a lingering fear that this was all too good to be true. Emily stepped in behind me, her eyes wide as she took in our new home. We did it, Mom, she whispered, a smile breaking across her face. I pulled her into a tight hug, feeling the tension of the past few days finally start to ebb away. We sure did, sweetheart. As we began to unpack our meager belongings, my phone buzzed incessantly. Daniel's name flashed on the screen, along with a barrage of increasingly angry text messages. I silenced the phone, pushing down the guilt and anxiety that threatened to surface. Is that Dad? Emily asked, her voice tight. I nodded, forcing a reassuring smile. Don't worry about it. He'll calm down eventually. But as the day wore on, Daniel's messages became more frantic and threatening. By evening, my phone was ringing nonstop, and I could feel my resolve starting to crumble. Maybe I should talk to him, I muttered, more to myself than to Emily. She grabbed my hand, her eyes fierce. No, Mom. Remember why we left. Don't let him manipulate you. I squeezed her hand, drawing strength from her determination. You're right. We're in this together. Just as we were settling in for our first night in our new home, a loud banging on the door made us both jump. Daniel's voice, slurred and angry, echoed through the apartment. Evelyn, I know you're in there. Open this door right now. Emily's face drained of color. How did he find us? My mind raced. Had I been careless? Left a trail somehow? The banging intensified, and I could hear our neighbors starting to stir. "Emily, go to your room and lock the door," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Call the police." As she disappeared down the hall, I approached the door, my heart pounding. "Daniel, you need to leave. Now." "Not until you open this door and talk to me," he roared. "You can't just take my daughter and run." I leaned against the door, feeling it shake with each of his blows. "She's not just your daughter, Daniel, and we're not coming back. It's over." His voice dropped, taking on a pleading tone that made my stomach churn. "Evelyn, please, I'm sorry, I'll change, we can work this out." For a moment I hesitated. The familiar pull of his manipulations tugged at me, years of conditioning threatening to override my resolve. Then I heard Emily's voice, soft but firm, from behind me. "Mom, the police are on their way. Stay strong." Her words snapped me back to reality. I straightened up, my voice clear and unwavering. "Daniel, I'm not opening this door. If you don't leave now, you'll be arrested." "Is that what you want Emily to see?" There was a long pause, broken only by the sound of approaching sirens. Then, with a final defeated thud against the door, I heard Daniel's footsteps retreating. As the police arrived, taking statements and ensuring our safety, I felt a strange mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. We had faced our final test and come out stronger. Later that night, as Emily slept peacefully in her new room, I sat by the window, watching the city lights flicker. My phone buzzed one last time. A text from Daniel. "I'm sorry. I'll sign the papers. Just take care of her." Tears pricked my eyes as I realized the magnitude of what we'd accomplished. We had broken free, faced our fears, and come out the other side. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but we had each other, and that was enough. As the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. We had weathered the storm, and now, finally, we could begin to rebuild our lives on our own terms. The future was ours to shape, and for the first time in years, I was excited to see what it would bring. The day I served Daniel with divorce papers was the day I truly reclaimed my life. My hands shook as I watched him read through the documents, his face cycling through shock, anger, and finally defeat. "Alimony?" he sputtered, looking up at me with disbelief. "After everything I've done for you and Emily?" I stood my ground, channeling all the strength I'd built over the past months. "Everything you've done? You mean the neglect, the lies, the infidelity?" "Yes, Daniel. Alimony, for the emotional turmoil you've put us through." He slumped in his chair, the fight draining out of him. "You're really going through with this, aren't you?" "I am," I said firmly. "It's time we both moved on." As I turned to leave, Daniel's voice stopped me. "Evelyn, I'm sorry. For everything." I paused at the door, not turning back. "I know, Daniel, but sometimes sorry isn't enough." Walking out of that office, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in years, I felt truly free. Back at our new apartment, Emily was waiting, her face a mix of anxiety and hope. "How did it go?" I pulled her into a hug. "It's done, sweetheart. We're starting our new life on our own terms." Tears welled up in her eyes. "I'm proud of you, Mom. We did it." As we settled into our new routine, challenges arose. There were tight budgets to navigate, a new job for me to adjust to, and Emily's transition to college life. But through it all, our bond grew stronger. One evening, as we sat on our small balcony watching the sunset, Emily turned to me with a serious expression. "Mom, I need to tell you something." My heart skipped a beat. "What is it, honey?" She took a deep breath. "I've been thinking about changing my major. I know we talked about business, but I want to study social work. I want to help other families like you helped us." Tears pricked my eyes as I pulled her close. "Oh, Emily, I'm so proud of you. You follow your heart, always." As the weeks turned into months, our new life took shape. I threw myself into my work, finding a sense of purpose I'd long forgotten. Emily thrived in her studies, her passion for helping others growing with each passing day. Daniel, true to his word, signed the divorce papers without contest. The alimony payments helped ease our financial burden, allowing us to focus on healing and growth. 1 year to the day after we left our old life behind, Emily and I stood in our living room, surrounded by friends from work and school. The room buzzed with laughter and conversation, a far cry from the tense silences of our past. As I looked around at the life we'd built, I felt a surge of pride and gratitude. We had faced our fears, overcome obstacles, and emerged stronger than ever. Emily appeared at my side, linking her arm through mine. "Penny for your thoughts, Mom?" I smiled, squeezing her hand. "Just thinking about how far we've come, how strong we are together." She nodded, her eyes shining. "We make a pretty good team, don't we?" "The best," I agreed. As the party continued around us, I realized that this moment of joy, of peace, of true connection, was what I'd been fighting for all along. Not just for Emily, but for myself too. We had rewritten our story, transforming pain into strength, fear into courage. And as I looked towards the future, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together. Our journey wasn't over. In many ways, it was just beginning. But now we were writing our own story, on our own terms, and that made all the difference. As the night wound down and our guests departed, Emily and I stood at the window, watching the city lights twinkle below. She leaned her head on my shoulder, a contented sigh escaping her lips. "You know, Mom," she said softly, "I used to think happily ever afters were just for fairy tales, but now I think maybe we've found ours." I wrapped my arm around her, my heart full. "You're right, sweetheart, this is our happily ever after, and we've earned every bit of it." As we stood there, bathed in the soft glow of our new life, I knew that we had not just survived, we had triumphed, and our story, our real story, was only just beginning. The sound of Martha's shrill voice pierced through the thin walls of our temporary bedroom, grating on my last nerve. I gripped the edge of the vanity, willing myself to take deep breaths. This was supposed to be a short-term arrangement, but it felt like an eternity. "Naomi, are you decent? I need to talk to you about dinner tonight." I closed my eyes, counting to 10 before responding. "Just a minute, Martha." I smoothed down my blouse and opened the door, plastering on a smile. "What can I help you with?" Martha's eyes narrowed as she looked me up and down. "You're not wearing that to dinner, are you?" "It's so plain." I bit back a retort. "I have a video call with my publisher in an hour. This is work attire." "Work, work, work," Martha clucked her tongue. "When are you going to focus on starting a family? You're not getting any younger, you know." The familiar ache in my chest flared up, but I pushed it down. "Jake and I will start a family when we're ready," I said, my tone clipped. Martha waved her hand dismissively. "Well, don't wait too long. Now, about dinner. I was thinking we could have pot roast, but Richard insists on grilling steaks. What do you think?" "Whatever you decide is fine," I said, eager to end the conversation. "You could at least pretend to care," Martha huffed. "This is your home now, too." I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. This wasn't my home. It was a temporary living situation that was quickly becoming unbearable. Just then, Jake appeared in the hallway. "Everything okay here?" he asked, his eyes darting between Martha and me. "Oh, Jake," Martha's face lit up. "Tell your wife she needs to be more involved in family decisions. After all, you two will be living here for quite some time." Jake's expression faltered for a moment before he recovered. "Mom, Naomi's got a lot on her plate with work. Why don't you and Dad decide on dinner?" Martha's lips pursed, but she nodded. "Fine, we'll discuss this later." She turned and headed downstairs. As soon as she was out of earshot, I rounded on Jake. What did she mean? Living here for quite some time? I thought this was temporary. Jake ran a hand through his hair, avoiding my gaze. "Well, about that, the job transfer is taking longer than expected. We might need to stay here for a few more months." The room spun around me. "Months? Jake, I can't do this for months." "I know it's not ideal," Jake said, reaching for my hand. I pulled away. "But it's free rent, and we're saving money, plus Mom and Dad love having us here." "They love having you here," I corrected. "Your mother can barely tolerate me." Jake sighed. "You're exaggerating. Look, I've got to head to the office. We'll talk more tonight, okay?" Before I could protest, he was gone, leaving me alone with the weight of his words. Months. How was I supposed to survive months of Martha's constant judgment and Richard's belittling comments? I retreated to our room, closing the door and leaning against it. The secret I'd been carrying for years felt heavier than ever. If they knew the truth, that I couldn't have children, would it make things better or worse? My phone buzzed with a reminder about the video call. I took a deep breath, pushing my personal turmoil aside. I had work to do, a career I'd fought hard for. I wouldn't let Martha or this situation derail that. As I set up my laptop, I heard Richard's booming voice from downstairs. "Jake gone already? That boy needs to learn to relax." And that wife of his? When is she going to start contributing to this household? I clenched my fists, anger bubbling up inside me. This wasn't the life I'd envisioned when Jake and I got married. Something had to change, and soon. But for now, I had to focus on work. It was the only thing keeping me sane in this house of judgment and secrets. Little did I know, the real storm was yet to come. The next morning, I woke to the sound of Martha rummaging through my closet. I bolted upright, heart racing. "What are you doing?" Martha turned, holding up one of my blouses with disdain. "Just seeing if you have anything suitable for the charity luncheon this afternoon." "Really, Naomi, don't you own anything with color?" I snatched the blouse from her hands. "I wasn't aware of any luncheon, and I'd appreciate it if you'd respect my privacy." Martha's eyes narrowed. "Privacy? You're living in our house, dear. And as for the luncheon, I told Jake to inform you. It's important for our family's image." I bit back a retort. Of course, Jake hadn't mentioned it. He'd been increasingly distant lately, always at work or out with colleagues. "I'm sorry, Martha, but I have a deadline today. I can't attend." Her face clouded with disappointment and anger. "You never make an effort, do you? No wonder Jake's been so stressed lately." Before I could respond, she stormed out, leaving me seething. I grabbed my laptop and headed downstairs, desperate for some coffee and solitude. But Richard was already in the kitchen, eyeing me over his newspaper. "Late start today? Must be nice to have such a flexible schedule." I ignored him, focusing on making my coffee. As I reached for a mug, Richard cleared his throat. "You know, Naomi, when Martha and I were your age, we already had Jake and were well established in our careers. Don't you think it's time you and Jake got serious about your future?" The mug slipped from my hand, shattering on the floor. Coffee splashed everywhere, including on Richard's shoes. "For God's sake," he bellowed. "Can't you do anything right?" Something inside me snapped. "Enough," I shouted, surprising even myself. "I've had it with your constant criticism and lack of respect. I am a successful editor. I contribute to this household, and my personal choices are none of your business." Richard's face turned an alarming shade of red. "How dare you speak to me like that in my own home? Jake will hear about this." "Good," I retorted. "Maybe he'll finally stand up for me instead of letting you two walk all over us." I stormed out, leaving the mess behind. My hands shook as I dialed Jake's number. It went straight to voicemail. Again. Frustrated, I sent a text. "We need to talk. Your parents have crossed a line." Hours passed with no response. I threw myself into work, trying to ignore the tension simmering in the house. As evening approached, I heard the front door open and Jake's voice mingling with his parents. I steeled myself and went downstairs. The conversation stopped abruptly as I entered the room. "Nice of you to join us," Martha said coldly. "We were just discussing your behavior today." Jake looked uncomfortable. "Naomi, what happened? Dad says you yelled at him?" I couldn't believe it. "That's what you're concerned about? Not the fact that your mother invaded our privacy or that they both constantly belittle me?" Jake ran a hand through his hair. "Look, I know it's been tough, but they're just trying to help. Maybe if you made more of an effort." "Made more of an effort?" I interrupted, my voice rising. "I've been bending over backward trying to fit into this family, but nothing I do is ever good enough." Martha gasped dramatically. "After all we've done for you two. Jake, are you going to let her speak to us like this?" I turned to Jake, silently pleading with him to take my side. But he just looked away, muttering, "Maybe we should all calm down and discuss this rationally." In that moment, I saw my marriage for what it truly was, a sham. Jake would never stand up to his parents, never prioritize our relationship over their demands. "There's nothing to discuss," I said quietly. "I'm going for a walk. Don't wait up." As I grabbed my coat and headed for the door, I heard Richard mutter, "Good riddance." Jake called after me, "Naomi, wait." But I was already gone, stepping into the cool night air, my mind reeling. For the first time since we'd moved in with Jake's parents, I felt a strange sense of clarity. Something had to change, and soon. I just didn't realize how drastic that change would be. I returned from my walk late that night, exhausted but no closer to a solution. The house was quiet, everyone presumably asleep. As I crept up the stairs, I noticed a faint light coming from Jake's study. Curious, I approached the door, left slightly ajar. Jake's voice drifted out, low and intimate. "I know, Claire. I'm trying to figure it out." My heart stopped. "Claire? Who was Claire? It's complicated, Jake continued. Naomi's been on edge lately, and my parents, well, you know how they are. I leaned closer, barely breathing. Soon, I promise. We'll be together soon. I love you too. The world tilted on its axis. Jake, my Jake, was having an affair. The pieces fell into place. His late nights, his distraction, his reluctance to stand up to his parents. It all made sense now. I stumbled back, my mind reeling. How long had this been going on? How could I have been so blind? Just then the study door swung open. Jake stood there, phone still in hand, his face a mask of shock and guilt. Naomi, he stammered. I can explain. I held up a hand, silencing him. Don't bother. I heard enough. Jake reached for me, but I jerked away. Please, let's talk about this. Talk? I laughed bitterly. Like you talked to Claire just now? No, Jake, we're done talking. I turned and fled down the stairs, ignoring Jake's calls. I needed to get out, to breathe, to think. As I reached for the front door, Martha appeared in her robe. Naomi? What's going on? I whirled on her. Did you know about Jake and Claire? Martha's face paled, confirming my suspicions. Oh, honey, she said, reaching for me. We were going to tell you, but... But what? I spat. You were too busy criticizing me? Too focused on getting your precious grandchildren? Martha flinched. That's not fair. We only want what's best for Jake. And what about me? I shouted, no longer caring who heard. Did you ever consider what was best for me? Richard appeared behind Martha, his face thunderous. Now see here, young lady. But I was beyond caring. No, you see here. I've put up with your judgment, your criticism, your constant belittling, and all this time you've been covering for Jake's affair? Jake came down the stairs, his face ashen. Naomi, please, let's discuss this privately. I laughed, a harsh, broken sound. Privately? Like how you've been privately planning a life with Claire? No, Jake, we're done with secrets. I turned to Martha and Richard. You want to know why we don't have children? Because I can't have them. That's right, your precious son married a barren woman. How's that for your perfect family image? The silence that followed was deafening. Martha's hand flew to her mouth. Richard stood slack-jawed, and Jake looked like he'd been punched in the gut. Naomi, he whispered. Why didn't you tell me? I met his gaze, my voice cold. Would it have mattered? Would it have stopped you from falling into Claire's arms? Jake had no answer. I nodded, a strange calm settling over me. That's what I thought. I turned to the door, pausing with my hand on the knob. I'll be back for my things tomorrow. Don't try to stop me. As I stepped out into the night for the second time, I heard Martha's wail and Richard's angry shouts. But I didn't look back. My world had shattered, but from the ruins I would build something new. Something that was truly mine. I pulled out my phone and dialed my best friend's number. Sarah, it's me. I need a place to stay, and I need a good divorce lawyer. As I walked away from the house that had never been my home, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The road ahead would be hard, but for the first time in years, I was free. I spent the night at Sarah's, tossing and turning as my mind raced. By morning, I was exhausted but resolute. I had to face Jake, to end this charade once and for all. Sarah squeezed my hand as I left. You've got this, Naomi. Remember, you deserve better. I nodded, steeling myself for the confrontation ahead. When I arrived at Jake's parents' house, Martha opened the door, her eyes red-rimmed. Naomi, please, she began, but I brushed past her. Jake was in the living room, looking as if he hadn't slept either. Naomi, he said, rising. I'm so glad you came back. We need to talk. Yes, we do, I replied coldly. But first, I want you to look me in the eye and tell me everything about Claire. Jake flinched but held my gaze. Claire and we've been seeing each other for 6 months. It started as a friendship, but you fell in love, I finished for him. The words tasted like ash in my mouth. He nodded miserably. I never meant to hurt you, Naomi. I felt trapped. The pressure from my parents, your focus on your career. I know it's no excuse, but you're right, I cut him off. It's no excuse. Do you have any idea what I've been going through? The constant criticism, the loneliness, the guilt about not being able to give you children. Jake's eyes widened. About that. Why didn't you tell me? I laughed bitterly. When, Jake? When you were too busy with work. Or when you were sneaking around with Claire. Martha and Richard hovered in the doorway, their faces a mixture of shame and indignation. We had no idea, Martha said softly. If we'd known. You'd what? I snapped. Treat me with basic human decency? I shouldn't have had to earn that. Richard stepped forward, his face flushed. Now see here, young lady. No, you see here, I interrupted, my voice rising. I've put up with your judgment and your son's betrayal for far too long. I want a divorce, Jake. The room fell silent. Jake's face crumpled, but to my surprise, he nodded. If that's what you want, I won't fight you on it. His easy acquiescence was like a knife to my heart. After everything, he wouldn't even fight for our marriage. That's it? I asked, my voice breaking. You're just gonna let me go? Jake spread his hands helplessly. What do you want me to say, Naomi? We've been unhappy for a long time. Maybe this is for the best. I felt something inside me shatter, the last remnants of hope, perhaps, or maybe it was the final nail in the coffin of our marriage. Fine, I said, my voice eerily calm. I'll have my lawyer contact you. I want you out of our apartment by the end of the week. Jake's head snapped up. What? But where am I supposed to go? I gestured around the room. You seem quite comfortable here with Mommy and Daddy. I'm sure they'll be happy to have you. Martha stepped forward, her face pale. Naomi, please, can't we discuss this? I turned to her, my eyes blazing. There's nothing to discuss. You've made your choice, and I've made mine. As I headed for the door, Jake called out, Naomi, wait. What about everything we've built together? I paused, my hand on the doorknob. You mean the life you were planning with Claire? Or the clothing line we were developing? Jake's face paled. The clothing line? Naomi, you wouldn't what? I asked, a dangerous edge to my voice. Wouldn't fight for what's rightfully mine. You'd be surprised what I'm capable of, Jake. With that, I walked out, slamming the door behind me. As I got into my car, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Grief, anger, but also a sense of liberation. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number. Hello, is this Claire? We need to talk. Meet me at the coffee shop on Main Street in an hour. Trust me, you'll want to hear what I have to say. As I drove away, I caught a glimpse of Jake watching from the window. For the first time in years, I didn't look back. I sat at the coffee shop, my hands wrapped around a steaming mug, waiting for Claire. My mind raced with all the things I wanted to say. All the anger and hurt I wanted to unleash. When she walked in, I almost didn't recognize her. She was younger than I'd imagined, probably in her late 20s, with long blonde hair and a hesitant smile. Naomi? She asked, approaching my table. I nodded, gesturing for her to sit. Thank you for meeting me, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I assume you know who I am? Claire nodded, her face pale. Jake's wife. I'm so sorry. I held up a hand. Save it. I'm not here for apologies. I'm here for the truth. Over the next hour, Claire spilled everything. How she'd met Jake at a work conference, how he'd pursued her relentlessly, spinning tales of an unhappy marriage and a wife who didn't understand him. He told me you two were separated, Claire said, tears in her eyes, that you were only staying together for appearances. I swear, if I'd known... I laughed bitterly. Oh, we were separated, all right, by his lies and his cowardice. As Claire continued to talk, a plan began to form in my mind. Jake had lied to both of us, manipulated us for his own gain. It was time he faced the consequences. Claire, I interrupted her rambling apologies. I have a proposition for you. Her eyes widened. What do you mean? I leaned forward. Jake's been playing us both. What do you say we turn the tables on him? By the time I left the coffee shop, Claire and I had hatched a plan that would make Jake's head spin. But first, I had one more stop to make. I drove back to Jake's parents' house, my resolve strengthening with each mile. When Martha opened the door, her face fell. Naomi, please, can we talk about this? She pleaded. I brushed past her, marching into the living room where Richard sat in his armchair. Where's Jake? I demanded. He's not here, Richard growled. And after the way you spoke to us yesterday... Shut up, I snapped, surprising even myself with my vehemence. You two have done nothing but criticize and belittle me from the day I married your son. Well, now you're going to listen. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what I was about to reveal. You want to know why Jake and I don't have children? Why your precious son sought comfort in another woman's arms? It's because I can't have children. I'm infertile. Martha gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Richard's face paled. That's right, I continued, my voice shaking with emotion. I've known for years, but I couldn't bear to tell anyone, not even Jake. I was too afraid of losing him, of disappointing everyone. But you know what? I'm not afraid anymore. I turned to Martha, my eyes blazing. Your constant nagging about grandchildren, your snide comments about my career, did you ever stop to think about how that made me feel? Did you ever consider that there might be a reason we didn't have children yet? Martha began to sob, but I wasn't finished. I rounded on Richard. And you, your belittling remarks, your dismissal of my work, did it make you feel like a big man to tear down your daughter-in-law? Richard opened his mouth to speak, but I cut him off. No, I don't want to hear it. I'm done with your excuses, your judgment, your toxic family dynamics. I'm filing for divorce, and I'm going to make sure Jake pays for every lie he's told. As I turned to leave, Martha called out, Naomi, wait, we didn't know. We never meant. I paused at the door, looking back at their shell-shocked faces. It's too late for apologies. You've made your bed, now lie in it. And tell him he hasn't seen anything yet. With that, I walked out, slamming the door behind me. As I got into my car, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Grief for the family I'd lost, anger at the betrayal, but also a fierce determination. Jake and his parents had no idea what was coming. I pulled out my phone and dialed my lawyer. It's time, I said. Let's take him for everything he's got. I stormed into Jake's parents' house, my lawyer's words still ringing in my ears. We've got him cornered, Naomi. Don't let them manipulate you. The living room fell silent as I entered, Jake, Martha, and Richard all turning to stare at me with a mix of fear and apprehension. Naomi, Jake started, rising from his seat. I'm glad you're here. We need to talk. Oh, we're well past talking, I cut him off, my voice ice cold. I'm here to settle this once and for all. Martha stepped forward, wringing her hands. Please, dear, let's all calm down and discuss this rationally. I laughed bitterly. Rationally? Like how you've all been acting so rationally behind my back. Richard's face reddened. Now see here, young lady. No, you see here, I snapped, silencing him with a glare. I've had enough of your condescension and your lies, all of you. Jake approached me, his hands raised in a placating gesture. Naomi, I know I've made mistakes, but... Mistakes, I echoed, my voice rising. Is that what you call having an affair and planning a new life with another woman? Martha gasped, her eyes darting between Jake and me. Jake, what is she talking about? I turned to Martha, my eyes blazing. Oh, don't pretend you didn't know. In fact, why don't you tell me exactly what you knew? Martha's face paled, and she stumbled back, collapsing onto the sofa. I don't know what you mean. Don't lie to me, I shouted, my composure finally cracking. I want the truth, all of it right now. The room fell silent, tension thick in the air. Then, to my shock, Martha began to sob. We just wanted grandchildren, she wailed, her words tumbling out in a rush. We thought if Jake met someone else, someone younger. The world seemed to tilt on its axis as the implications of her words sank in. You engineered Jake's affair? I whispered, disbelief coloring my voice. Richard stepped forward, his face a mask of shame and defiance. Now, Naomi, you have to understand. We only wanted what was best for Jake, for the family. Best for the family? I repeated, my voice rising hysterically. You destroyed your son's marriage, and you think that was best for the family? Jake stood frozen, his face ashen. Mom, Dad, is this true? Martha nodded miserably. We introduced you to Claire at that charity gala. We encouraged her to pursue you. I felt as if I'd been punched in the gut. All this time I'd blamed myself, my infertility, my focus on my career, but it had been them orchestrating this betrayal from the shadows. How could you? I whispered, tears streaming down my face. How could you do this to me? To us? Jake turned to me, his eyes pleading. Naomi, I swear, I didn't know. I mean, yes, I made my own choices, but I had no idea they were behind it. I shook my head, backing away from all of them. It doesn't matter. Don't you see? This family is toxic. You've all been lying and manipulating each other, and for what? Some twisted idea of what a perfect family should be? Martha reached out to me. Naomi, please. We can fix this. We can start over. No. I cut her off, my voice firm despite my tears. There's no fixing this. You've broken something that can never be repaired. I turned to Jake, meeting his eyes one last time. I hope you and Claire are very happy together. You deserve each other. As I walked out of that house for the last time, I felt a strange mix of devastation and liberation. My world had been shattered, but from the ruins I would build something new, something honest, something mine. I pulled out my phone and dialed my lawyer. "It's time," I said, my voice steady. "Let's end this once and for all." Little did they know, I had one last card to play, and it would change everything. The next morning, I stood outside the courthouse, my heart pounding. Today was the day everything would change. My lawyer, Sarah, squeezed my arm reassuringly. "You've got this, Naomi. Remember, we have all the evidence." I nodded, taking a deep breath as we entered the building. Jake, Martha, and Richard were already there, huddled together with their lawyer. Jake's eyes met mine, a mixture of guilt and defiance in his gaze. As we took our seats, the judge entered and the proceedings began. Jake's lawyer presented their case first, painting me as a career-obsessed wife who neglected her family duties. I gritted my teeth, forcing myself to remain calm. Then it was our turn. Sarah stood, her voice clear and confident. "Your Honor, we have evidence that will change everything you've heard today." She presented the recordings I'd made of Martha and Richard, admitting to engineering Jake's affair, the text messages between Jake and Claire, and financial records showing how Jake had been funneling money into a separate account for his new life with Claire. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Jake's face paled, while Martha and Richard looked shell-shocked. The judge called for order, his face stern. "Mr. Thompson," he addressed Jake, "do you have anything to say about these allegations?" Jake stood slowly, his shoulders slumped. "Your Honor, I can't deny it. My parents did introduce me to Claire, but—" He paused, taking a deep breath. "But I made my own choices. I betrayed my wife, and I'm deeply ashamed." Martha let out a strangled sob. "Jake, no. We did it for you, for the family." The judge silenced her with a sharp look. "Mrs. Thompson, you'll have your chance to speak. Now, Mr. Thompson, continue." Jake turned to face me, his eyes brimming with tears. "Naomi, I'm so sorry. I know it doesn't change anything, but you deserve to know the truth. Yes, my parents introduced me to Claire, but I pursued the affair. I let their pressure about having children cloud my judgment. I was weak, and I hurt you in the worst way possible." The courtroom fell silent. I felt all eyes on me, waiting for my reaction. My hands shook as I stood. "Your Honor," I began, my voice surprisingly steady, "I have one more thing to add." I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what I was about to reveal. "The reason Jake and I didn't have children, it's because I can't. I'm infertile." Gasps echoed through the room. Martha's hand flew to her mouth, while Richard's face drained of color. "I've known for years," I continued, tears streaming down my face. "But I was too afraid to tell anyone, even Jake. I was terrified of losing him, of disappointing everyone. But now I see that my silence only made things worse." I turned to face Jake and his parents directly. "Your constant pressure, your manipulation, your betrayal, it all stems from this obsession with having the perfect family. Well, guess what? There's no such thing as a perfect family, and in trying to create one, you've destroyed everything we had." The judge cleared his throat, his expression somber. "This is clearly a complex situation with fault on multiple sides. We'll take a brief recess, and then I'll deliver my decision." As we filed out of the courtroom, I felt a strange mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. The truth was finally out. All of it. Whatever happened next, I knew I'd done the right thing. Sarah touched my arm. "Naomi, there's someone here to see you." I turned to see Claire standing nervously in the hallway. My heart raced as I approached her, unsure of what to expect. "Naomi," she said, her voice shaking, "I have something you need to hear. Something that will change everything." As Claire began to speak, I realized that this wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning of a whole new chapter. Claire's revelation hit me like a tidal wave. She wasn't just Jake's mistress, she was carrying his child. The irony was almost too much to bear. All those years of pressure, of feeling inadequate, and now this. I stumbled back into the courtroom, my mind reeling. Jake's eyes met mine, confusion etched across his face. He didn't know. Not yet. The judge called the session to order, ready to deliver his verdict. But I couldn't let it end like this. I stood up, my voice shaking but determined. "Your Honor, if I may, there's been a new development." The judge nodded, and I took a deep breath. "Claire, Jake's companion, is pregnant with his child." The courtroom erupted in chaos. Martha let out a strangled cry of joy, while Richard's face turned an alarming shade of red. Jake sat there, stunned into silence. "Order!" The judge's gavel came down hard. Mrs. Thompson, is this verified? I nodded, my heart pounding. Claire is here to confirm it herself. As Claire was brought in to testify, I watched the faces of those who had hurt me so deeply. Martha and Richard, their manipulative scheme finally bearing fruit, but at what cost? Jake, the father-to-be, looking lost and ashamed. When the dust settled, the judge delivered his final verdict. The divorce was granted, with a settlement heavily in my favor due to Jake's infidelity and financial deception. But it felt hollow. No amount of money could heal the wounds inflicted by their betrayal. As we filed out of the courtroom, I felt a hand on my arm. It was Jake. Naomi, I don't know what to say. I looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time in months. There's nothing left to say, Jake. You're going to be a father. Isn't that what you always wanted? His face crumpled. Not like this. Never like this. I shook my head, a sad smile on my face. It's too late for regrets now. You've made your choices. Now you have to live with them. As I turned to leave, Martha approached, her eyes brimming with tears. Naomi, dear, please. Can't we talk about this? We're still family. No, I cut her off firmly. We're not family. We never really were. You made sure of that. I walked away, leaving them all behind. Sarah, my lawyer and friend, fell into step beside me. So, what now? She asked gently. I took a deep breath, feeling lighter than I had in years. Now I start over, on my terms. In the weeks that followed, I threw myself into rebuilding my life. I moved back into my old apartment, which I'd kept as a secret sanctuary all this time. I poured my energy into my work, finally free to pursue my career without guilt or judgment. The clothing line Jake and I had been developing? I bought out his share and rebranded it as a line for strong, independent women. It was a hit, far more successful than it ever would have been under Jake's influence. As for children, I decided to become a mentor to young girls interested in publishing. It wasn't the family I'd once dreamed of, but it filled my heart in ways I never expected. 1 year to the day after the divorce was finalized, I stood in my apartment looking out over the city. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah, inviting me to dinner to celebrate my recent promotion. As I grabbed my coat, I caught sight of myself in the mirror. The woman staring back at me was stronger, wiser, and infinitely more content than the one who had lived in fear of disappointing others. I smiled at my reflection. You did it, Naomi, I whispered. You found your happy ending. As I stepped out into the crisp evening air, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The road had been hard, the betrayals deep, but I had survived. More than that, I had thrived. My story wasn't over. It was just beginning, and this time I was the author of my own destiny. The sound of shattering glass jolted me from my sleep. My heart raced as I sat up, disoriented in the darkness. Ethan's side of the bed was empty, the sheets cold. Where was he? I fumbled for my phone, squinting at the bright screen. 3:17 a.m. This wasn't like him at all. Ethan? I called out, my voice echoing through our silent house. No response. Slipping on my robe, I crept downstairs, following the faint glow from the kitchen. As I approached, I heard hushed voices. Ethan's and a woman's? I peered around the corner, my breath catching in my throat. There was Ethan, hunched over the kitchen island, head in his hands. Across from him stood a woman I hadn't seen in years but would recognize anywhere. Jennifer, his estranged sister. You can't keep doing this, Jen, Ethan was saying, his voice strained. Charlotte and I agreed. Oh, spare me the lecture, big brother, Jennifer snapped. You know I wouldn't be here if I had any other choice. I stepped into the kitchen, unable to contain myself any longer. What's going on here? They both whirled to face me, guilt written all over Ethan's face. Jennifer, on the other hand, looked triumphant. Well, she drawled. If it isn't the lovely Charlotte, did we wake you? Cut the crap, Jennifer, I snapped. What are you doing in my house at 3 a.m? Ethan stepped between us, hands raised placatingly. Char, I can explain. You'd better, I said, crossing my arms. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've been lying to me. Jennifer let out a harsh laugh. Oh, he's been lying all right. For months now, sending me money, helping me out, all behind your back. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Is that true? I asked Ethan, willing him to deny it. He couldn't meet my eyes. I didn't know how to tell you. After everything that happened last time. Last time? I exploded. Last time she nearly ruined us, Ethan. We agreed to cut her off. You promised me. I know, he said, reaching for me. I jerked away. But she needed help, Char. She's my sister. And I'm your wife, I shouted, tears pricking at my eyes. How could you do this to me? To us? Jennifer smirked, clearly enjoying the drama. Face it, Charlotte. Blood is thicker than water. Ethan will always choose me over you. That's enough, Ethan roared, rounding on his sister. You need to leave now. Fine, Jennifer shrugged, sauntering towards the door. But this isn't over, big brother. You owe me. The door slammed behind her, leaving Ethan and me in a deafening silence. Charlotte, he began, his voice pleading. I'm so sorry. I should have told you. How long? I interrupted, my voice barely above a whisper. He hesitated. 6 months. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. 6 months of lies, 6 months of sneaking around behind my back, 6 months of choosing her over me. I trusted you, I said, my voice breaking. After everything we've been through, I thought we were past this. We are, Ethan insisted, reaching for me again. This time, I let him take my hands. Charlotte, I love you. You're my wife, my partner. Jennifer, she's just my sister. She needed help, and I couldn't turn my back on her. But you're the one I choose. Always. I wanted to believe him. God, how I wanted to. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of our troubles. I need some time, I said, pulling away from him. I can't process this right now. As I turned to leave the kitchen, Ethan called out, Where are you going? I paused in the doorway, not looking back. To pack a bag. I'm staying at Olivia's tonight. Don't try to stop me. With that, I climbed the stairs, my mind reeling. How had my life turned upside down so quickly? And more importantly, how was I going to fix it? I stared at my phone, thumb hovering over Ethan's name. 3 days of silence stretched between us like an abyss. Part of me wanted to hurl the device across Olivia's guest room, but I forced myself to hit call instead. He answered on the first ring. Charlotte? Are you okay? We need to talk, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Meet me at Rosie's diner in an hour. The bell above the door chimed as Ethan walked in, looking like he hadn't slept in days. Good. At least I wasn't the only one suffering. Thanks for coming, I said as he slid into the booth across from me. Of course, he replied, fidgeting with a napkin. Char, I'm so sorry. I held up a hand. I didn't ask you here for apologies. I want answers. Why, Ethan? After everything Jennifer's put us through, why would you risk our marriage for her? He sighed, shoulders slumping. She's changed, Charlotte. She's been through some rough times, and she's really trying to turn her life around, I scoffed. And you believe her? After all the lies? I do, he said, meeting my eyes. She's been sober for 8 months. She's holding down a job. And she's been seeing a therapist. That caught me off guard. A therapist? Ethan nodded. She was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. It explains a lot of her past behavior. She's on medication now, and it's making a real difference. I felt my resolve wavering. If Jennifer was genuinely trying to get help, why didn't you tell me? I asked, my voice softer now. I wanted to, Ethan said, reaching across the table. This time I let him take my hand. But I was afraid you wouldn't believe her, that you'd think it was just another manipulation. Can you blame me? I asked, pulling my hand away. After what happened last time? Ethan winced. I know, but she's my sister, Char. I couldn't turn my back on her when she was finally asking for help. And just then, the waitress appeared with our usual orders. As she set down my coffee, I caught a glimpse of her name tag, Jennifer. My stomach churned. You still should have told me, I said, pushing the mug away. We're supposed to be partners, Ethan. No secrets. You're right, he admitted. I screwed up, but I want to make it right. What can I do? I took a deep breath. I want to meet with Jennifer, see this change for myself. Ethan's eyes widened. Are you sure? I don't want to put you in an uncomfortable position. I'm sure, I said, even as doubt gnawed at me. It's the only way I'll know if I can trust either of you again. He nodded slowly. Okay, I'll set it up. As we left the diner, Ethan reached for my hand. I let him take it, but the gesture felt hollow. Trust, once broken, was not easily mended. The next evening, I found myself standing outside Jennifer's apartment, my heart pounding. Ethan squeezed my hand reassuringly as he knocked. The door swung open, revealing a woman I barely recognized. Gone was the wild-eyed, disheveled Jennifer of old. This woman looked put together. Calm. Charlotte, she said, her voice lacking its usual edge. I'm so glad you came. Please, come in. As we stepped inside, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking into the lion's den. But I had to know the truth. Jennifer gestured to the couch. "Can I get you anything? Water? Tea?" "No, thank you," I said stiffly. "I think we should just talk." She nodded, settling into an armchair across from us. "I owe you an apology, Charlotte. My behavior has been inexcusable, and I'm truly sorry for all the pain I've caused you and Ethan." I studied her face, searching for signs of deception. "Ethan tells me you've been getting help." "Yes," Jennifer said, her eyes dropping to her hands. "I should have done it years ago, but I was too proud, too scared to admit I needed help." As she spoke about her diagnosis, her treatment, I felt my anger slowly giving way to something else. Understanding? Pity? I wasn't sure. But just as I was starting to relax, Jennifer's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, her face paling. "Everything okay?" Ethan asked, concern etching his features. "Fine," Jennifer said quickly. Too quickly. "It's nothing." But I saw the panic in her eyes, the slight tremor in her hands as she set the phone down, and in that moment, I knew. She was lying. Again. The annual Thompson family barbecue was in full swing, but I couldn't shake the unease that had settled over me since our meeting with Jennifer. Ethan's hand on my lower back felt more like a restraint than comfort as we navigated through clusters of relatives. "Charlotte, dear." Ethan's mother, Margaret, swooped in for a hug. "We've missed you. How are you holding up?" I forced a smile. "I'm fine, Margaret. Just been busy with work." She patted my cheek. "Well, we're all so glad you two worked things out. Family is everything, after all." As if summoned by those words, Jennifer appeared, all smiles and charm. "Charlotte, I'm so happy you could make it." I tensed, remembering the panic in her eyes at her apartment. "Jennifer, how nice to see you." "Oh, come now," she laughed, linking her arm through mine. "Be strangers. We're practically sisters." Before I could protest, she was steering me away from Ethan, towards a group of cousins I barely knew. As we walked, she leaned in close. "I know you don't trust me," she whispered, her breath hot on my ear. "But you should be careful. There are things about you Ethan doesn't know, things I could tell him." I jerked away, heart pounding. "What are you talking about?" Jennifer's smile was razor sharp. "Oh, you know, your little indiscretion last year when you thought Ethan was cheating?" The world tilted sideways. How could she possibly know about that? "I don't know what you're talking about," I managed, but my voice shook. "Don't you?" Jennifer's eyes glittered. "That handsome client of yours, Robert, was it? I'm sure Ethan would be fascinated to hear all about your late-night meetings." "Nothing happened," I hissed, even as shame burned through me. It was true. Nothing had happened. But I'd been tempted. God help me, I'd been tempted. "Maybe not," Jennifer shrugged. "But how do you think it would look to Ethan, to everyone here?" I glanced around wildly, suddenly aware of how many eyes were on us. Ethan was watching from across the yard, brow furrowed in concern. "What do you want?" I asked, defeat heavy in my chest. Jennifer's smile widened. "Oh, nothing much, just your support. When I tell Ethan I need a place to stay for a while." "Absolutely not," I snapped, finding my backbone. "I won't let you manipulate us anymore." "Then I guess I'll just have to share what I know," Jennifer said, raising her voice. "Hey, everyone, I have an announcement to make." Panic clawed at my throat. "Jennifer, don't," but it was too late. She was already clinking her glass, drawing everyone's attention. "I just wanted to say how grateful I am to be here," Jennifer began, her voice syrupy sweet, "and how thankful I am to Ethan and Charlotte for their support during my recovery." I held my breath, waiting for the other shoe to drop. "In fact," she continued, "I have some exciting news. I'm pregnant." The crowd erupted in cheers and congratulations. I stood frozen, unable to process what was happening. Ethan pushed through the crowd, his face a mask of shock. "Jen, what? How?" Jennifer's eyes locked on mine, triumph blazing in them. "Oh, it's such a blessing, and I'm so glad I'll have family to help me through it. You'll let me stay with you, won't you, big brother?" The silence that fell was deafening. All eyes turned to Ethan, then to me. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. This couldn't be happening. Ethan reached for my hand. "Char, I jerked away, bile rising in my throat. "Don't touch me." And then I was running, pushing past concerned relatives, ignoring the calls of my name. I didn't stop until I reached my car, fumbling with the keys as tears blurred my vision. As I peeled out of the driveway, one thought pounded through my head. This was it. The final straw. My marriage was over. The cardboard box felt heavier than it should as I packed the last of my belongings. 2 weeks had passed since the disastrous family barbecue, and I still couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal that clung to me like a second skin. "Are you sure about this, Charlotte?" Olivia asked, hovering in the doorway of what used to be my bedroom. I nodded, not trusting my voice. The truth was, I wasn't sure of anything anymore. But I knew I couldn't stay in this house, surrounded by memories of a life that now felt like a lie. As if on cue, Ethan's voice drifted up from downstairs. "Char, can we talk?" I closed my eyes, steeling myself. "I'll be down in a minute," I called back, my voice steadier than I felt. Olivia squeezed my arm. "I'll wait in the car. Take your time." I found Ethan in the kitchen, looking lost among the half-packed boxes. The sight of him still made my heart ache, despite everything. "So, this is really happening," he said, gesturing to the chaos around us. "It is," I replied, keeping my distance. "I think we both know it's for the best." Ethan's shoulders slumped. "I never wanted this, Charlotte. I love you. We can still fix this." I shook my head, feeling the familiar sting of tears. "Can we? After everything that's happened, Jennifer's pregnant, Ethan. And you chose her. Again. I didn't choose her over you," he protested. "I'm just trying to help my sister." "At what cost?" I asked, my voice rising. "Our marriage? My trust? When does it end?" Before he could answer, a sharp pain lanced through my abdomen. I gasped, doubling over. "Charlotte!" Ethan was at my side in an instant, his arm around my waist. "What's wrong?" "I don't know," I managed through gritted teeth. "It hurts." The world tilted, and suddenly I was on the floor, Ethan's panicked face swimming above me. I heard him calling for Olivia, felt hands lifting me, but it all seemed far away. The next thing I knew, I was in a hospital bed, the steady beep of monitors filling the air. Olivia sat beside me, her face drawn with worry. "What happened?" I croaked, my throat dry. Olivia's eyes filled with tears. "Oh, honey, you collapsed. The doctors say it was a combination of stress and exhaustion. Your body just shut down." I closed my eyes, letting the information sink in. "Where's Ethan?" "He's outside. He's been here the whole time, pacing like a caged animal. Do you want me to get him?" Part of me wanted to say no, to shut him out completely, but a larger part, the part that still loved him despite everything, needed to see him. I nodded, and moments later, Ethan was by my side, his eyes red-rimmed and worried. "Char," he breathed, taking my hand. "I was so scared, I thought I might lose you." "You can't lose what you've already thrown away," I said, but there was no bite to my words, just exhaustion. Ethan's face crumpled. "I know I've messed up, but seeing you like this, it's made me realize what really matters. You're everything to me, Charlotte. Please, give me one more chance. I'll do whatever it takes." I wanted to believe him. God, how I wanted to. But the memory of Jennifer's smug face, of Ethan's repeated betrayals, held me back. "I can't do this anymore, Ethan," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "The stress, the lies, it's killing me. Literally." He nodded, tears spilling down his cheeks. "I understand, but I'm not giving up on us, Charlotte. I'll prove to you that you can trust me again, whatever it takes." As he spoke, a nurse entered, clipboard in hand. "Mrs. Thompson? We have your test results." I braced myself, expecting the worst, but nothing could have prepared me for her next words. "Congratulations," she said with a smile. "You're pregnant." The world stopped. I looked at Ethan, saw my own shock mirrored in his eyes. In that moment, I knew everything was about to change, again. I stared at the pregnancy test in my hands, the 2 pink lines mocking me. It had been a week since the hospital, and I still couldn't wrap my head around it. Pregnant, with everything going on, how could this be happening? A knock on the bathroom door startled me. "Charlotte?" Olivia's voice called. "You okay in there?" I opened the door, wordlessly holding out the test. Olivia's eyes widened. "Oh, honey," she breathed, pulling me into a hug. "What are you going to do?" That was the million-dollar question, wasn't it? I pulled away, sinking onto the edge of the bathtub. "I don't know," I admitted. "I mean, Ethan and I were barely speaking, and with Jennifer's pregnancy." Olivia sat beside me, her face serious. "Charlotte, I know things are complicated, but maybe this is a sign, a chance to start fresh," I scoffed. "A fresh start? With all this baggage?" "Listen to me," Olivia said, grabbing my hands. "You love Ethan. Despite everything, I know you do. And he loves you. Maybe it's time to lay all the cards on the table. Really talk things through." I wanted to argue, to list all the reasons why that was a terrible idea. But a small part of me, the part that still clung to hope, whispered that maybe she was right. "Okay," I said finally. "I'll talk to him, but I'm not promising anything." An hour later, I found myself sitting across from Ethan at our favorite coffee shop. The familiar setting felt strange now, like a relic from another life. "Thanks for meeting me," I said, fidgeting with my cup. Ethan nodded, his eyes searching my face. "Of course, Charlotte, I'm pregnant," I blurted out, unable to hold it in any longer. Ethan's jaw dropped. For a moment he just stared at me, shock written all over his face. Then, slowly, a smile spread across his features. "We're having a baby?" he whispered, reaching for my hand. I pulled back, shaking my head. "Ethan, this doesn't change anything. We still have a lot to work through." His smile faltered. "I know. But Charlotte, this is incredible news. We're going to be parents." "So is Jennifer," I reminded him, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. Ethan's face fell. "About that, there's something you should know." My heart clenched. "What now?" He took a deep breath. "Jennifer, she's not really pregnant. It was all a lie, to manipulate us. I found out yesterday." The world tilted on its axis. "What?" I gasped. Why would she do that?" "She's sick, Charlotte," Ethan said, his voice heavy with regret. "She's off her meds, has been for months. I've arranged for her to get help, real help this time, in a facility where she can't hurt anyone else." I sat back, stunned. All this time, all the pain and betrayal, for a lie? "I'm so sorry," Ethan continued, his eyes pleading. "I should have seen through her act. I should have trusted you. Can you ever forgive me?" I looked at him, really looked at him. The man I'd fallen in love with, the man I'd built a life with. He'd made mistakes, huge ones. But hadn't I too? "I don't know," I said honestly, "but I think I want to try." Relief washed over Ethan's face. He reached for my hand again, and this time I let him take it. "We have a lot to work on," I warned. "Trust to rebuild. It won't be easy." "I know," he nodded. "But you and our baby, you're worth fighting for. I'll do whatever it takes, Charlotte, I promise." As I sat there, Ethan's hand warm in mine, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, we could find our way back to each other, for ourselves and for the little life growing inside me. "Okay," I said softly. "Let's go home." And with that decision, I took the first step on a new, uncertain path, one that I hoped would lead us back to the love we once shared, stronger and wiser than before. The soft glow of candlelight flickered across Ethan's face as we finished our dinner. 3 months had passed since our reconciliation, and tonight marked a milestone, our first home-cooked meal together since I'd moved back in. "This is nice," I said, reaching for his hand across the table. Ethan smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "It is. How are you feeling? Any morning sickness today?" I shook my head, unconsciously resting a hand on my slightly swollen belly. "Not today, but Ethan, is everything okay? You seem distracted." He hesitated, then sighed. "I'm sorry, Char. Work's been crazy lately. There's this big project, and The shrill ring of his phone cut him off. Ethan glanced at the screen, his face tightening. "I have to take this," he said, standing abruptly. "I'll be right back." As he hurried from the room, a familiar unease settled in my stomach. I'd seen this behavior before, when he was hiding Jennifer's involvement in our lives. Against my better judgment, I followed him, pausing outside his study door. "I told you not to call me at home," Ethan was saying, his voice low and urgent. "No, I can't meet you tonight. Charlotte's suspicious enough as it is." My heart pounded. Who was he talking to? What was he hiding now? "Look, I'll figure something out," Ethan continued. Just give me a few more days. I promise I'll make it right." I stumbled back, my mind reeling. After everything we'd been through, after all his promises, was he lying to me again? When Ethan returned to the dining room, I was waiting, arms crossed. "Who was that?" I asked, fighting to keep my voice steady. He blinked, caught off guard. "Oh, just work stuff. Nothing important." "Don't lie to me, Ethan," I snapped, my composure cracking. "I heard you. Who can't you meet tonight? What are you trying to make right?" Ethan's face paled. "Charlotte, I can explain." "Then explain," I shouted, tears burning my eyes, "because from where I'm standing it looks like you're betraying me all over again." He reached for me, but I jerked away. "It's not what you think," he pleaded. "I swear I'm not cheating on you." "Then what is it?" I demanded. "Because I can't do this again, Ethan. I won't." He ran a hand through his hair, visibly struggling. It's Jennifer. The world tilted sideways. Jennifer? I thought she was in a facility. Getting help. She was, Ethan said, his voice barely above a whisper. But she checked herself out last week. She's been calling me, begging for money. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. And you've been giving it to her? After everything? I didn't want to stress you out, he said, about reaching for me again. With the baby and us trying to rebuild, I thought I could handle it on my own. I stepped back, shaking my head. You promised me, Ethan. No more secrets, no more lies. I know, he said, his voice breaking. I'm so sorry, Charlotte. I was trying to protect you. By lying to me? I laughed bitterly. How's that working out? Before he could respond, a sharp pain lanced through my abdomen. I gasped, doubling over. Charlotte! Ethan cried, rushing to my side. What's wrong? I don't know, I panted, fear clawing at my throat. Something's not right. As Ethan helped me to the couch, another wave of pain hit. I looked down in horror to see a small spot of blood on my pants. Oh, God, I whispered, meeting Ethan's panicked gaze, the baby. In that moment, everything else fell away. The lies, the betrayal, even Jennifer. None of it mattered. All I could think about was the precious life inside me and the terrifying possibility that I might lose it. As Ethan called for an ambulance, I closed my eyes, silently praying. Please, let our baby be okay. Please, don't let this be the price of our mistakes. But as another cramp seized me, I couldn't shake the feeling that our fragile attempt at reconciliation was crumbling around us, taking our dreams of a family with it. The sterile hospital walls seemed to close in on me as I waited for news about my baby. The last few hours had been a blur of pain, fear, and frantic medical activity. Now, in the eerie quiet of the recovery room, I was left alone with my thoughts and the steady beep of monitors. Ethan burst through the door, his face etched with worry. Charlotte, I'm so sorry. I got here as fast as I could. How are you? The baby? I turned away, unable to look at him. The baby's fine, I said, my voice hollow. Just a scare. The doctor says I need to rest and avoid stress. Ethan's relief was palpable. Thank God, he breathed, reaching for my hand. I pulled away. Don't, I said, finally meeting his eyes. I can't do this anymore, Ethan. The lies, the secrets. It's killing me. And now it almost cost us our child. His face crumpled. Charlotte, please, I know I messed up, but I swear I'll make it right. No more secrets. I laughed bitterly. You said that before. How can I ever trust you again? Before he could respond, a commotion in the hallway caught our attention. A familiar voice, shrill and angry, echoed through the corridor. I need to see my brother. You can't keep me out. My blood ran cold. Jennifer, Ethan paled. I'll handle this, he said, moving towards the door. No, I said, struggling to sit up. I want to hear what she has to say. Jennifer burst into the room, her eyes wild. When she saw me, she sneered. Well, if it isn't the happy couple. Jennifer, you need to leave, Ethan said, stepping between us. She ignored him, focusing on me. Did he tell you about the baby? My heart stopped. What are you talking about? Jennifer's laugh was cruel. Oh, this is Rich. He didn't tell you, did he? I'm pregnant, Charlotte. And guess who the father is? The world tilted sideways. I looked at Ethan, silently begging him to deny it, but the guilt in his eyes said everything. No, I whispered, feeling like I might be sick. Tell me it's not true. Ethan reached for me, his voice breaking. Charlotte, I'm so sorry. It was a mistake. I was drunk, and Jennifer, she took advantage. Took advantage? Jennifer screeched. You came to me, Ethan. You were the one who said you were unhappy, that Charlotte didn't understand you. I closed my eyes, willing this nightmare to end. But when I opened them, nothing had changed. My husband, the father of my child, had betrayed me in the worst possible way. Get out, I said, my voice deadly calm. Both of you, get out of my sight. Charlotte, please, Ethan begged. Let me explain. There's nothing to explain, I shouted, tears streaming down my face. You slept with your sister. You got her pregnant. While I was at home, carrying your child, trying to rebuild our marriage. Jennifer smirked, one hand resting on her belly. Face it, Charlotte. You've lost. Ethan will always choose family over you. Something inside me snapped. With strength I didn't know I possessed, I lunged out of the bed, grabbing Jennifer by the collar. You are not his family, I hissed. You're a cancer, destroying everything you touch. Ethan pulled me back, his face a mask of shock. Charlotte, stop! Think of the baby. His words were like a bucket of ice water. I stumbled back, suddenly aware of the monitors beeping frantically around me. As nurses rushed in, alerted by the commotion, I locked eyes with Ethan one last time. "We're done," I said, my voice breaking. "I want a divorce." The last thing I saw before the sedative took hold was Ethan's devastated face and Jennifer's triumphant smirk. As darkness claimed me, one thought echoed through my mind. How had my life come to this? And more importantly, how was I going to pick up the pieces? 6 months after leaving Ethan, I stood in front of the mirror, barely recognizing the woman staring back at me. My hand rested on my now prominent baby bump, a bittersweet reminder of the life I was building. Alone, but stronger than ever. The doorbell rang, jolting me from my reverie. Olivia's voice called out, "Charlotte, you ready?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself. Today was the day I'd face Ethan for the first time since the hospital, the final divorce hearing. As we drove to the courthouse, Olivia squeezed my hand. "You've got this, Char. Remember how far you've come." She was right. In the past months, I'd thrown myself into creating a new life. Our online business was thriving, giving me a sense of purpose and financial independence I'd never known. But more importantly, I'd rediscovered myself, the strong, resilient woman I'd lost somewhere along the way. The courthouse loomed before us, a monument to endings and beginnings. As we climbed the steps, I spotted Ethan waiting by the entrance. My heart clenched, but not with longing, with pity. He looked terrible, his once crisp suit hanging loosely on his frame, dark circles under his eyes. When he saw me, his face crumpled. "Charlotte," he breathed, reaching for me. I stepped back. "Don't," I said, my voice steady. "Let's just get this over with." Inside, as our lawyers finalized the paperwork, Ethan leaned towards me. "I lost my job," he whispered. "The stress. I made some mistakes at work, big ones." I nodded, unsurprised. "And Jennifer?" His face darkened. "Gone. If she lost the baby. If there ever was one. Turns out it was all a lie to manipulate me." A part of me wanted to feel vindicated, but mostly, I just felt sad. "I'm sorry, Ethan, for all of it." He looked at me, eyes brimming with regret. "I ruined everything, didn't I? Us, the life we built. I threw it all away." "We both made mistakes," I said softly. "But yes, you did, and now we both have to live with the consequences." As I signed the final document, a weight lifted from my shoulders. It was done. I was free. Outside the courthouse, Ethan caught my arm. "Charlotte, wait, I know I have no right to ask, but the baby. Will I ever?" I met his gaze, seeing the broken man before me. In that moment, I made a decision that surprised even me. "You're still this child's father, Ethan," I said. "If you can prove to me that you've changed, really changed, then yes, you can be part of their life. But it has to be on my terms." Relief washed over his face. "Thank you," he whispered. "I promise I'll do whatever it takes." As Ethan walked away, Olivia appeared at my side. "You okay?" I nodded, a small smile tugging at my lips. "Yeah, I think I am." That night, as I sat on my balcony watching the sunset, I felt a flutter in my belly. My hand flew to the spot, tears springing to my eyes as I felt my baby kick for the first time. In that moment, everything crystallized. The pain, the betrayal, the heartache, it had all led me here, to this moment of pure, unadulterated joy. I thought about the journey ahead, single motherhood, building my business, maybe even finding love again someday. It wouldn't be easy, but I was ready. Ready to face whatever life threw at me, on my own terms. As the last rays of sunlight painted the sky, I made a promise to myself and to my unborn child. We would build a life filled with love, honesty, and strength. A life where we never compromised our happiness for anyone else's mistakes. The future stretched out before me, uncertain but full of possibility. And for the first time in a long time, I felt truly, completely free. I placed both hands on my belly, smiling through my tears. "It's just you and me, little one," I whispered, "and we're going to be just fine." As night fell, I stepped back inside, closing the door on my old life and embracing the new one waiting to begin. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I knew one thing for certain. I was ready to face them, stronger and more resilient than ever before. The spatula clattered to the floor, splattering pancake batter across my freshly mopped kitchen tiles. I stared at the mess, fighting back tears of frustration. This was supposed to be easy. How hard could it be to make a simple breakfast? "Everything okay in there, hon?" Ben called from the dining room. I plastered on a smile he couldn't see. "Just peachy. Be ready in a jiffy." Grabbing paper towels, I frantically wiped up the spill. My phone pinged with a notification. Another comment on my latest blog post about effortless entertaining. If they only knew. I tossed the soiled towels and retrieved a clean spatula, determined to salvage this disaster. The griddle sizzled as I poured fresh batter, praying for edible results. Ben appeared in the doorway, looking annoyingly handsome in his tweed jacket. "Ellie, we're running late. I have that faculty meeting, remember?" I know. Just give me 5 more minutes." I flipped a slightly burnt pancake onto a plate, wincing at its sad appearance. He frowned, eyeing the mess. "Maybe we should just grab something on the way?" "Did you forget to set an alarm again?" I bit back a retort. "No, I've been up since 6. These things just take time." 6? He raised an eyebrow. "What have you been doing all morning?" The accusation in his tone made my cheeks burn. I gestured at the immaculate living room, visible through the archway. "Cleaning, obviously. You know how I like to keep things tidy." Ben's eyes narrowed. "Ellie, be honest. Did you hire a maid?" I gaped at him, pancake forgotten. "What? No, why would you think that?" He sighed, running a hand through his salt and pepper hair. "It's just, everything's always so perfect. The house, your outfits, those elaborate blog posts. I know how much you struggled with housework when we first got married. It doesn't add up." My throat tightened. "So you think I'm lying? That I can't possibly manage our home without help?" "I didn't say that," Ben backpedaled. "I just worry you're stretching yourself too thin, trying to maintain this image." I slammed the spatula down. "It's not an image, Ben. This is who I am now. I've worked hard to improve." He held up his hands. Okay, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have accused you." But the damage was done. I turned away, blinking back tears. "Your pancakes are ready. I need to get dressed." I fled upstairs, leaving Ben calling after me. In our bedroom, I collapsed onto the bed, my carefully constructed world crumbling around me. My phone buzzed again. Another glowing comment, praising my seemingly effortless life. If they only knew the truth, how I spent hours scrubbing and re-scrubbing, how I practiced recipes late into the night, how I agonized over every word and photo on my blog. I'd worked so hard to become the perfect wife, the envy of our social circle. And now Ben thought it was all fake? Anger bubbled up, replacing the hurt. I'd show him. I'd prove I could do it all, be the ideal homemaker and a successful career woman. Squaring my shoulders, I marched to the closet and selected a crisp white blouse and pencil skirt. I touched up my makeup, erasing any trace of distress. Downstairs, Ben was finishing his pancakes. He looked up guiltily as I entered. "Ellie, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have." I cut him off with a bright smile. "Water under the bridge, darling. Now, don't you have a meeting to get to?" He blinked, thrown by my sudden change in demeanor. Right. Yes." I handed him his briefcase and kissed his cheek. "Have a wonderful day, sweetheart. I'll see you tonight." As the door closed behind him, my smile faded. I pulled out my phone, fingers flying over the keys as I composed a new blog post. 5 simple steps to a spotless home, I typed. Number 1, start with a positive attitude. I paused, a devious glint in my eye. Oh, I'd show Ben just how capable I could be, and I'd do it with a smile. I stood in the kitchen, scrubbing furiously at an already spotless counter. The events of the morning replayed in my mind, Ben's accusation echoing like a broken record. How dare he question my abilities, my dedication? The front door opened, and I tensed. Ben's footsteps approached, hesitant. "Ellie," he called, "can we talk?" I turned, forcing a smile. "Of course, darling. How was your meeting?" He frowned, clearly thrown by my cheerful demeanor. "It was fine. Look about this morning." "Water under the bridge," I chirped, turning back to my task. "No, it's not." Ben's hand on my arm stopped me. "We need to discuss this." I faced him, my smile slipping. "Discuss what exactly? How you don't trust me? How you think I'm incapable of managing our home?" He sighed. "That's not what I meant. I'm just concerned. You're always so perfect. It's not natural." My jaw clenched. "So now I'm too good at being a wife? Make up your mind, Ben." "That's not." He ran a hand through his hair. "I miss the old Ellie. The one who burned dinner and left laundry in piles, the one who didn't obsess over every little detail." I recoiled as if slapped. "The old Ellie wasn't good enough for you. Remember? You were always complaining about the mess, about eating takeout every night." "I never meant for you to change completely." Ben's voice rose. "I just wanted you to try a little harder. But this perfect housewife act, it's not you, Ellie." "Act?" I spat the word. "You think this is an act? I've worked my ass off to become this person, to be the wife you wanted. Ben's eyes widened. I never asked for this. I want my wife back, not some Stepford robot. The room spun. I gripped the counter, knuckles white. So what do you want from me, Ben? To be a slob? To fail at everything? He reached for me, but I flinched away. I want you to be yourself. To relax. To let me help around the house instead of doing everything yourself. I laughed bitterly. Oh, that's rich. Now you want to help? After years of criticizing my efforts? I never. Save it. I held up a hand. I don't need your help. I'm managing just fine on my own. Ben's expression hardened. Are you? Really? Because I'm starting to wonder if you've hired someone to help. A maid, maybe? Or a ghostwriter for your blog? The accusation hung in the air, sharp as a knife. I stared at him, speechless. That's what I thought, Ben said quietly. Ellie, this has to stop. You're running yourself ragged trying to maintain this facade. It's not a facade, I shouted, surprising us both. This is who I am now. Why can't you accept that? Ben's shoulders slumped. Because I don't recognize you anymore, and I'm worried about what this obsession is doing to you. To us. I turned away, blinking back tears. Maybe you never knew me at all. The silence stretched between us, a chasm widening with each passing second. Finally, Ben spoke. I have an idea. Why don't you spend some time with my mother? Learn from her? She's always been great at balancing everything. I whirled around, incredulous. You want me to shadow your mother? Like some kind of trainee housewife? That's not what I meant. No, I think that's exactly what you meant. My voice was ice. You don't think I can do this on my own. You think I need Mommy to show me how to be a proper wife. Ben's face flushed. That's not fair. I'm trying to help. Well, don't. I grabbed my purse from the counter. I don't need your help, and I certainly don't need your mother's. Ellie, wait. But I was already out the door, slamming it behind me. As I stormed down the driveway, my phone buzzed. Another notification from my blog. You're such an inspiration, the comment read. How do you do it all? I laughed, the sound bordering on hysterical. If they only knew. If Ben only knew. One thing was certain. I'd show them all just how capable I could be, no matter what it took. The doorbell chimed, shattering my concentration. I glanced at the clock, frowning. Ben wasn't due home for hours, and I wasn't expecting anyone. Wiping flour-covered hands on my apron, I hurried to answer. My heart sank as I opened the door. Hannah, Ben's mother, stood on the porch, a bright smile on her face. Surprise, dear, she chirped, sweeping past me into the foyer. I thought I'd pop by for a visit. I plastered on a smile, panic rising in my chest. Hannah? What a lovely surprise. I'm afraid you've caught me in the middle of baking. She waved a dismissive hand. Oh, don't worry about me. I'll just have a look around while you finish up. Before I could protest, Hannah was off, inspecting every nook and cranny of our home. I trailed behind, frantically searching for any imperfection she might criticize. To my shock, Hannah's comments were nothing but praise. Oh, Ellie, the living room is immaculate, and look at how you've organized the bookshelves. Simply charming. I blinked, unsure how to respond. Thank you, and the kitchen! Hannah exclaimed as we entered. My goodness, it's spotless. You must work so hard to keep everything in such perfect order. A lump formed in my throat. This was the validation I'd been craving, but it felt hollow coming from Hannah. Did she truly mean it, or was this some kind of test? It's nothing, really, I mumbled, averting my eyes. Hannah's hand on my arm startled me. Ellie, dear, are you all right? You seem tense. I opened my mouth to brush off her concern, but to my horror, tears welled up instead. I'm fine. It's just been a stressful few days. Hannah's expression softened. Oh, sweetheart. Come, sit down. Tell me what's troubling you. Before I knew it, I was pouring out the whole sordid tale. The fight with Ben, his accusations, the suggestion that I shadow Hannah. To my surprise, my mother-in-law listened without judgment, her face growing increasingly concerned. When I finished, Hannah shook her head. Oh, Ellie, I'm so sorry you've been going through this alone, and I'm furious with my son for treating you this way. I gaped at her. You are? Of course, Hannah's eyes flashed. The nerve of him questioning your abilities after all you've accomplished and suggesting you shadow me, as if you need lessons in homemaking. Honestly. A weight lifted from my shoulders. I was worried you'd agree with him. Hannah squeezed my hand. Never. Ellie, you've created a beautiful home here. More importantly, you've built a successful career with your blog. Ben should be celebrating your achievements, not tearing you down. Tears threatened again, but this time from relief. Thank you, Hannah. You have no idea how much that means to me. We sat in companionable silence for a moment before Hannah spoke again, her tone hesitant. Ellie, dear, may I ask you something? I nodded, suddenly wary. Are you happy? Truly happy, I mean. Not just putting on a brave face for the world? The question caught me off guard. I opened my mouth to give my usual cheery response, but the words stuck in my throat. Hannah's eyes were kind but knowing. It's okay if you're not, you know. No one can be perfect all the time, not even the fabulous lifestyle blogger Ellie Matthews. Something inside me cracked. The facade I'd worked so hard to maintain began to crumble. I'm exhausted, I whispered, the admission feeling like both a betrayal and a relief. I'm constantly terrified of slipping up, of not being good enough. For Ben, for my followers, for myself. Hannah nodded, understanding in her eyes. Oh, my dear, you don't have to carry this burden alone. Have you talked to Ben about how you're feeling? I shook my head, shame coloring my cheeks. I can't. He already thinks I'm faking it all. If he knew how much I'm struggling, then he'd have the chance to support you, Hannah finished gently. Ellie, marriage is a partnership. You don't have to be perfect all the time. As her words sank in, the front door opened. Ben's voice called out, Ellie, are you home? I saw Mom's car outside. Hannah and I exchanged a look. The moment of truth had arrived. I smoothed my dress for the 100th time, forcing a smile as Ben and I walked into the faculty dinner. After our recent fights, I was determined to prove I could be the perfect wife he seemed to want. The room buzzed with conversation, academics in tweed jackets mingling over glasses of wine. There's Jack, Ben said, steering me towards a portly man with a salt and pepper beard. I want you to meet his wife, Sarah. She's amazing, runs their household like clockwork while volunteering at the hospital. My stomach clenched. Another impossible standard to measure up to. Jack beamed as we approached. Ben, and this must be the famous Ellie. We've heard so much about you. I shook his hand, my blogger persona slipping into all good things, I hope. A harried-looking woman appeared at Jack's side, dark circles prominent under her eyes. Sorry I'm late, she muttered. The sitter canceled last minute. Ellie, this is my wife, Sarah, Jack said proudly. Superwoman herself. Sarah's tired eyes met mine, and I saw a flicker of recognition. Not of me, but of the exhaustion we both felt. As the men fell into shop talk, Sarah leaned closer. So you're the lifestyle guru. How do you do it? I can barely keep my head above water most days. I opened my mouth to give my usual perky response, but something in her desperate expression stopped me. Honestly, it's not easy. Some days I feel like I'm drowning too. Sarah's eyes widened. Really? But your blog, everything looks so perfect. I glanced at Ben, engrossed in conversation. It's mostly smoke and mirrors, I admitted quietly. I'm constantly stressed, trying to maintain this image. God, I thought it was just me. Sarah breathed. Jack's always going on about how I should be more like you, effortlessly juggling everything. Anger flared in my chest. There's nothing effortless about it, and it's not fair for them to expect that from us. Sarah nodded vigorously. I know. But try telling them that. Jack thinks I'm just being lazy when I can't keep up. Ladies. Ben's voice interrupted our conspiratorial whispers. What are you two gossiping about? I plastered on a smile. Oh, just swapping recipes. Sarah was telling me about her famous pot roast. Ben chuckled. Better not give away all your secrets, Sarah. Ellie might actually learn to cook. The casual jab stung more than it should have. I saw Sarah flinch in sympathy. Actually, I said, my voice steely, I was telling Sarah about my blog. She's interested in starting one of her own. Ben's eyebrows shot up. Really? Well, that's ambitious. Are you sure you have time for that, Sarah, with the kids and everything? I watched the light dim in Sarah's eyes. Oh, I don't know. It was just an idea. Nonsense, I said firmly. You absolutely could do it. I'd be happy to help you get started. Ben frowned. Ellie, don't go putting ideas in her head. Sarah's got enough on her plate already. Something snapped inside me. And what exactly is that supposed to mean, Ben? That women like us can't have aspirations beyond keeping house? The conversation around us quieted. Ben's face flushed. That's not what I meant. I just think. I know exactly what you think, I hissed. That we should be satisfied with being perfect little housewives, right? never mind our own dreams or ambitions. Ellie, please, Ben muttered, glancing around nervously. You're making a scene. I laughed bitterly. Heaven forbid I embarrass you in front of your colleagues. Well, don't worry, I won't stay to tarnish your reputation. Grabbing my purse, I turned to Sarah. Call me if you want to talk about that blog, or anything else. As I stormed out, I heard Ben making excuses behind me. Sorry, she's not feeling well. You know how women can be. Tears blurred my vision as I fumbled for my car keys. I'd tried so hard to be what Ben wanted, and for what? To be belittled and dismissed? Sitting in the parking lot, engine idling, I made a decision. No more perfect housewife act. No more bending over backwards to meet impossible standards. It was time to show Ben, to show everyone, exactly what Ellie Matthews was capable of, and God help anyone who tried to stand in my way. I stormed into Ben's office, a whirlwind of righteous anger. After the faculty dinner fiasco, I was done playing the perfect wife. It was time for a confrontation. The hallway was eerily quiet, most professors gone for the day. I reached for the doorknob, then froze. Muffled voices drifted through the wood. Ben wasn't alone. We can't keep doing this, Amy. Ben's voice, low and intimate. My heart stopped. Amy? His young research assistant? I know, a female voice replied, trembling, but I can't help how I feel about you. The world tilted on its axis. I stumbled back, my hand flying to my mouth to stifle a gasp. It's complicated, Ben sighed. Ellie? Hearing my name on his lips, spoken with such resignation, shattered something inside me. Before I could think, I shoved the door open. The scene before me burned into my retinas. Ben, shirt half unbuttoned, arms around a petite blonde. They sprang apart, guilt etched on their faces. Ellie, Ben's voice cracked. This isn't, I can explain. I held up a hand, silencing him, my gaze locked on Amy, who looked ready to bolt. How long? She flinched, unable to meet my eyes. 3 months, she whispered, 3 months. While I'd been killing myself to be the perfect wife, he'd been... A hysterical laugh bubbled up. Ellie, please, Ben pleaded. It was a mistake. It didn't mean anything. Didn't mean anything, I echoed, my voice dangerously calm. You've been sleeping with your student for 3 months, and it didn't mean anything. Amy's eyes widened. Student? But you told me you were separated. I turned to her, a spark of pity breaking through my rage. Oh, honey, he lied to you too. Ben's face drained of color. Amy, I can explain. Save it, she spat, grabbing her bag. I'm done being your dirty little secret. As Amy fled, I faced my husband, the man I'd loved since high school, the man I'd bent over backwards trying to please. Well, I said, crossing my arms, I'm waiting for that explanation. Ben ran a hand through his hair, desperation in his eyes. It was a moment of weakness. I've been under so much stress lately, and Amy was there, and... God, Ellie, I'm so sorry. Stress? I laughed bitterly. You want to talk about stress? Try maintaining a perfect home, a successful blog, and a marriage to a man who constantly belittles your efforts. That's stress? Ben. He reached for me, but I stepped back. I know I've been hard on you lately. I missed the old Ellie, the one who wasn't so obsessed with perfection. White-hot anger surged through me. The old Ellie wasn't good enough for you, remember? You wanted a perfect wife, so that's what I became. And it still wasn't enough. That's not true, Ben protested weakly. Isn't it? You criticized my housekeeping, my cooking, even my blog. Nothing I did was ever good enough, so you went looking for someone better. Tears streamed down my face, but I didn't bother wiping them away. Let him see the mess he'd made of me. Ellie, please, Ben begged. We can work through this. I'll do anything. Counseling, whatever you want. I stared at him, this stranger wearing my husband's face. All the love, all the history between us, tainted by his betrayal. In that moment, I made a decision. No more bending over backwards, no more sacrificing my happiness for his. You're right, Ben, I said quietly. We can't keep doing this. Hope flickered in his eyes. So you'll give me another chance? I shook my head, a weight lifting from my shoulders. No, I'm giving myself another chance, without you. As I walked out of his office, out of our marriage, I felt something I hadn't in years. Freedom. The path ahead was uncertain, terrifying even, but for the first time in a long time it was mine to choose. Let Ben deal with the fallout of his actions. I had a life to reclaim. My hands shook as I fumbled with the key to our Ben's house. The confrontation in his office replayed in my mind, fueling a fire of rage and determination. I had one goal now. gather my things and leave before he could sweet-talk his way out of this mess. As I burst through the door, a familiar voice stopped me cold. "Ellie, what's going on?" Amy stood in our living room, looking lost and tearful. I froze, my mind reeling. "What are you doing here?" She wrung her hands. I came to apologize, to explain. I had no idea you and Ben were still together. He told me you were separated, that you were just keeping up appearances for his career." A bitter laugh escaped me. "Of course he did. And you believed him?" Amy's face crumpled. "I'm so sorry, Ellie. I never meant to hurt anyone. I thought we were in love." The last word hit me like a physical blow. Love. Had Ben ever truly loved me, or had I just been a convenient prop in his perfect professor life? Before I could respond, the front door flew open. Ben rushed in, his eyes wild. "Ellie, please, we need to talk." He stopped short, seeing Amy. "What are you doing here?" "Apparently cleaning up your mess," I snapped. "Did you really think you could keep juggling us both?" Ben's face paled. "It's not like that. I never meant for any of this to happen." "But it did happen, Ben," I shouted, years of pent-up frustration bursting free. "You lied to both of us. You made me feel inadequate, pushed me to be this perfect wife, all while carrying on with your student." Amy flinched at the word student. "Is that true? Am I going to lose my scholarship over this?" Ben turned to her, panic in his eyes. No, of course not. We can keep this quiet. No one has to know." "Are you kidding me?" I interrupted. "You're still trying to cover this up? What about taking responsibility for once in your life?" "You don't understand," Ben pleaded. "If this gets out, I could lose my job, my reputation." "Your reputation?" Amy's voice rose, hysteria edging in. "What about my future? My career? God, I'm such an idiot." As they argued, a calm settled over me. I'd spent so long trying to be what Ben wanted, I'd lost sight of myself. But now, watching him scramble to salvage his carefully constructed image, I saw him clearly for the first time. "Enough," I said quietly. They both turned to me, startled by my tone. "This ends now." Ben stepped towards me, desperation in his eyes. "Ellie, please, we can work this out. I'll do anything. Just don't..." "Don't what, Ben? Don't tell the truth? Don't shatter your precious reputation?" I shook my head. "I'm done protecting you. I'm done being your perfect little wife." I turned to Amy, who looked ready to bolt. "You should go to the dean, report what happened, protect yourself and your future." "Ellie, no," Ben shouted. "You can't do this to me." Something snapped inside me. "I can't do this to you. What about what you've done to us? To our marriage, to Amy's trust?" I grabbed my phone, fingers flying over the keys. "You want to talk about reputations? Let's see what your colleagues think when they read my next blog post. Living my truth, how I discovered my husband's affair and found myself." Ben lunged for the phone, but I danced away. "Don't you dare," he growled. "Or what?" I challenged. "You'll belittle me some more? Make me feel small and inadequate?" "Those days are over, Ben." As I hit publish, a weight lifted from my shoulders. Ben's face contorted with rage and fear, but I felt only relief. "It's done," I said quietly. "The truth is out there now. Deal with the consequences." I turned to leave, but Ben grabbed my arm. "You've ruined everything," he hissed. As I stared into the eyes of the man I once loved, now a stranger, I realized this was far from over. The real battle was just beginning. I stood on Hannah and George's doorstep, my heart pounding. The weight of what I was about to do threatened to crush me, but I steeled myself. There was no going back now. Hannah opened the door, her smile fading as she took in my tear-stained face. "Ellie? What's wrong, dear?" I couldn't hold it in any longer. The whole sordid tale came pouring out, Ben's affair, the confrontation, my blog post exposing it all. By the time I finished, we were sitting in their living room, Hannah's arm around me while George paced, his face thunderous. "I'll kill him," George muttered. "My own son? How could he do this?" Hannah squeezed my hand. "What do you need from us, Ellie?" I took a deep breath. "I want a divorce. And I need your support. Ben's going to fight this, I know it." The words hung in the air, heavy with finality. Hannah and George exchanged a look, years of unspoken communication passing between them. "Of course we support you," Hannah said firmly. "What Ben did is unforgivable." Relief washed over me, followed quickly by guilt. "I'm so sorry. I never wanted to come between you and your son." George stopped pacing, his expression softening. "You didn't, Ellie. Ben did that all on his own." Just then, my phone buzzed. A notification from my blog, comments pouring in on my latest post. I hesitated, then opened it. "Oh my God," I whispered. "What is it?" Hannah leaned in, concerned. I showed her the screen, my hands shaking. "My post. It's gone viral. Thousands of shares, hundreds of comments, women sharing their own stories of infidelity and empowerment." As I scrolled, another notification popped up. An email from a major publishing house expressing interest in turning my story into a book. "I don't understand," I said, overwhelmed. "How did this happen so fast?" George chuckled. "You underestimate your influence, Ellie. Your blog has quite the following." The realization hit me like a tidal wave. All those years of curating the perfect image, and it was my moment of raw honesty that resonated the most. Before I could process it, my phone rang. Ben's name flashed on the screen. "Don't answer it," Hannah advised, but I shook my head. "I have to face him sometime." I took a deep breath and answered. "Hello. How dare you?" Ben's voice was low, dangerous. "Do you have any idea what you've done? The dean's called an emergency meeting. My career is on the line." Anger flared in my chest. "Your career? What about my life, Ben? The years I wasted trying to be perfect for you." "Perfect?" he scoffed. "You were suffocating me with your obsession, and now you've ruined everything. I hope you're happy." The line went dead. I stared at the phone, numb. "Ellie?" Hannah's voice seemed far away. "What did he say?" I looked up, meeting their concerned gazes. "He blames me for everything." George's face darkened. That boy never could take responsibility for his actions. "But he's right," I whispered. "I did ruin everything. Our marriage, his career." Hannah took my hands firmly. "No, Ben ruined those things when he chose to betray you. You simply told the truth." As her words sank in, another email notification pinged. This time, from our joint bank account. My blood ran cold as I read the message. "He's emptied our accounts, transferred everything to a private account in his name." The room spun. Years of savings gone in an instant. My entire life dismantled in a matter of hours. "That's it," George said, reaching for his phone. "I'm calling our lawyer." I stared at the email, Ben's final act of betrayal burning into my retinas. In that moment, I realized the true battle was just beginning. Ben wouldn't go down without a fight, and neither would I. "No," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'll call my own lawyer. It's time I stood on my own 2 feet." As I dialed the number, a strange calm settled over me. The life I'd known was over, but a new one was just beginning. And this time, I'd be the one in control. I stood in the courtroom, my heart pounding as the judge prepared to deliver her verdict. Months of bitter legal battles had led to this moment. Ben sat across the aisle, his once handsome face haggard and resentful. "In the matter of Matthews versus Matthews," the judge began, her voice echoing in the tense silence, "this court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Ellie Matthews." A collective gasp rippled through the room. I closed my eyes, relief washing over me like a tidal wave. "Furthermore," the judge continued, "given the evidence of financial misconduct, Mr. Matthews is ordered to repay all funds illegally transferred from joint accounts, plus interest." I opened my eyes to see Ben's face contort with rage. He leapt to his feet, shouting, "This is outrageous! She ruined my career, and now you're taking everything?" "Mr. Matthews, control yourself or I'll hold you in contempt," the judge warned. As Ben sank back into his seat, defeated, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. It was over. I was free. Outside the courthouse, Hannah and George enveloped me in a warm embrace. "We're so proud of you, Ellie," Hannah whispered, tears in her eyes. "Thank you," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I couldn't have done this without your support." As we turned to leave, a familiar voice called out. "Ellie, wait!" Ben approached, his expression a mix of anger and desperation. "Can we talk? Please?" I hesitated, then nodded to Hannah and George. "I'll be fine," I assured them. Once alone, Ben's facade crumbled. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice breaking. "I know I messed up, but isn't there any way we can fix this? Start over?" For a moment, I saw a glimmer of the man I'd fallen in love with all those years ago. But then I remembered the lies, the betrayal, the years of feeling inadequate. "No, Ben," I said softly. "We can't go back. Too much has changed." "Because of your blog?" he scoffed. "Your newfound fame?" I shook my head. "Because I've changed. I'm not the woman who bent over backwards trying to please you anymore. I like who I've become." Ben's face hardened. "So that's it? You're just going to throw away 15 years of marriage?" "You threw it away," I corrected him gently. "I'm just picking up the pieces and building something new." As I turned to walk away, Ben called out, You'll regret this, Ellie. You need me. I paused, looking back at him one last time. No, Ben. I don't. And that's the most liberating thing I've ever realized. Weeks later, I sat in my new apartment, surrounded by boxes yet to be unpacked. My laptop glowed with the final draft of my book, part memoir, part self-help guide for women reclaiming their lives. A notification pinged, another message from my blog's community. Women sharing their own stories of empowerment, thanking me for giving them courage. Tears pricked my eyes as I read their words. All those years of curating a perfect image, and it was my raw, honest truth that resonated the most. My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah, Jack's wife. Coffee tomorrow? I have big news. I smiled, remembering our conversation at the faculty dinner. She'd started her own blog, inspired by my journey. Now she was talking about going back to school, pursuing her long-forgotten dreams. As I typed a reply, I caught sight of my reflection in the window. Gone was the perfectly coiffed, perpetually stressed woman I'd been for so long. In her place was someone softer, stronger, someone real. The doorbell rang, startling me from my reverie. I opened it to find Hannah, arms laden with groceries. I thought you might need some help settling in, she said with a warm smile. You didn't have to do that, I protested, but she waved me off. Nonsense. You're family, Ellie. That hasn't changed. As we unpacked the groceries, chatting and laughing, I felt a profound sense of peace settle over me. My life hadn't turned out the way I'd planned, but maybe that was okay. I'd lost a husband, but gained a true family. Lost a facade, but found my authentic self. And in sharing my story, I'd connected with countless women on similar journeys. For the first time in years, I wasn't worried about being perfect. I was simply happy being me. As Hannah and I clinked coffee mugs in a toast to new beginnings, I knew with absolute certainty the best was yet to come.